I woke up to the sound of my stomach growling loudly. 2 days I had been lying in this broken-down house with barely anything inside it. I was hungry, tired, and confused about where I was. 2 days ago, I opened my eyes and found myself in a completely different world. My body had changed too. I was now a skinny teenage boy wearing torn clothes. After some time, I understood what had happened. I had been reborn into someone else's body. The original boy had just lost both his parents and was too weak and heartbroken to survive a cold night alone. Then I heard a happy voice at the door. My little sister Xiao Yin came running in, holding something in her small hands. She was only 5 or 6 years old. When she saw me awake, her eyes filled with tears. She told me she had been so scared these past 2 days. My face was hot and red. I kept saying I was cold, and I never answered when she called me. She thought I was going to leave her like our parents did. My heart ached looking at her. She brought a steamed bun that the old man next door had given her. She had saved it just to share with me. I tried to give her half, but she pushed it back, saying she wasn't hungry. But I clearly saw her swallow quietly when she held it. I made up a small excuse so she would eat her half too. We sat together, each of us holding our piece, quietly eating. After finishing, I noticed something strange. Earlier, when I looked at the bun, words had appeared floating above it, describing exactly what it was made of. Now I picked up a broken bowl from the table and stared at it. The same thing happened again. Words appeared, telling me it was a cracked ceramic bowl that looked dirty. This was real, and I couldn't help but smile a little. I sat on a stone stool in our small yard, holding a little plant with red flowers, staring at it. Words appeared floating above it, just like before. It told me the plant was called cowbone grass, that it was average quality but could be used as medicine and might help with bone injuries. So I finally understood what this strange ability of mine was. Whenever I focused my eyes on something long enough, a glow would appear around it, and words would describe it. The longer I looked, the more information I got. Objects with gray light only gave 1 line. Objects with white light gave 2 or more. I called Xiao Yin over to test it on her. Words appeared above her little head too. The first line made me almost laugh. It called her a human cub, female, but the second line made me go quiet. It said she seemed malnourished. I looked at her dry, yellowish hair and felt a deep sadness inside. I just told her she would grow up to be beautiful someday. She mentioned that old Dr. Chen knew all about plants and herbs. That reminded me. He was the kind village doctor who had come when I was sick. Xiao Yin told me he had boiled bitter medicine and made me drink it. She thought he cured me. Only I knew the truth. His medicine had kept my body warm just long enough for my mind to settle into this new body. Without him, I might never have woken up at all. Then Xiao Yin looked up at me with her big eyes and said she was hungry. So was I? The half bun from earlier was long gone. I checked the house. There was absolutely nothing to eat. The rice jar was completely empty. I thought hard about what to do. The land was mostly sold to pay for the parents' funeral. What little was left had not been farmed in a long time. Growing crops now would take too long. We would starve before anything grew. So I went into the back room and searched until I found an iron needle and some rope. I bent the needle into a hook using a chopstick, twisted the rope into a strong line, tied it all together, then cut a piece of bamboo from behind the house for a rod and tied a small piece of dry wood as a float. Just like that, I had made a simple fishing rod. I showed Xiao Yin the fishing rod I had made. Her eyes lit up when I told her it was for catching fish and that our meal today depended on it. The moment I mentioned fish soup, she started drooling. Before we left, I dug up some red earthworms from a cool corner of the yard to use as bait. I put them in a small bamboo tube, grabbed an old wooden bucket, and we headed out together. We had not walked far through the village when a woman named Aunt Wang called out to us. She was shocked to see me walking around. Apparently, the whole village had thought I was going to die. The old doctor had even said it was up to fate. People had been quietly talking about what would happen to Xiao Yin if I did not make it. Aunt Wang seemed genuinely glad I was alive. She warned me to take care of myself, saying Xiao Yin had no one else to depend on. I thanked her politely. She invited us to eat at her house, but I said no. I did not want us to keep relying on the kindness of others. That kind of goodwill runs out eventually. When she found out we were going fishing, she got worried and told me not to go into the water in my condition. I promised we would only sit on the bank. She finally let us go after making us swear we would not get in the river. As we walked through the village, almost everyone we passed was surprised to see me. Each time, Xiao Yin proudly told them the old doctor's medicine had saved me. The villagers grew even more impressed with Dr. Chen because of it. Most of the adults thought fishing was a waste of time. A few of them had tried it before and gave up after sitting for hours to catch only 1 or 2 tiny fish. They figured I was only doing it because I had no crops to tend and nothing left to eat. But a group of curious children followed behind us, eager to see how I would fish. I arrived at the river outside the village with Xiao Yin and a small group of curious children following behind me. The river was not very wide, maybe 10 meters across, but it was deep enough in places to swallow a person whole. So the first thing I did was tell everyone firmly, no going near the edge, no playing in the water. I told Xiao Yin to stay back and watch the wooden bucket. Before I started fishing, I walked slowly along the riverbank, studying the water. Choosing the right spot was the most important step. Back in my previous life, I was a serious fishing hobbyist, and I knew that no matter how good your skills were, if there were no fish where you cast your line, you would catch nothing. As I was looking around, my ability activated on its own. A gray glow appeared on the water's surface, and words told me it was an ordinary fishing spot where small fish gathered. It happened to be the exact spot I had already chosen myself. I felt quietly proud. My experience had led me to the right place even before the ability confirmed it. Encouraged by this, I kept walking and scanning the river with my ability on purpose. I found 2 more spots. One of them glowed white, which I now understood meant a higher grade. The words described it as a place where wild fruit often fell into the water, attracting larger fish, and hinted at the possibility of a surprising catch. After finding all 3 spots, I stopped searching. They were enough for now. The further parts of the river were too overgrown to reach easily anyway. I decided to start at the first spot, the one full of small fish. My fishing rod was simple, and the rope line might not hold against anything large. I only had 1 iron hook. If it snapped or got lost, I would have no way to fish at all. Small fish first was the safe choice. I came back to the children, let the oldest boy, Ahu, help carry the bucket, and we all walked over to the chosen spot together. I told them to stay up on the bank and watch from there, then headed down the slope to begin. I cleared the grass around the fishing spot, set down the bucket, and opened the bamboo tube of earthworms. The children up on the bank could see everything clearly and gasped when they spotted the wriggling worms inside. I put 1 worm on the hook and cast it right into the center of the glowing spot my ability had marked. Then I waited calmly. I could hear the children behind me holding their breath. The small wooden float began to tremble. I stayed still. Then it suddenly dipped sharply underwater, and I pulled the rod up fast. A small white fish flew out of the water and landed on the hook. The children erupted in excited whispers. Xiao Yin jumped up and down, shouting that I had caught a huge fish. I smiled to myself, relieved my skills had not gotten rusty on the very first cast. My ability showed me the fish glowed gray, with words confirming it was edible and good for nutrition. That was all I needed to know. Today we would eat. After that, I fell into a steady rhythm. 1 fish after another came up, small white fish, yellow-boned fish, little river shrimp. The children behind me were barely able to keep quiet. The fish here felt stronger and livelier than anything I had caught in my past life. Even the small ones gave a satisfying pull on the line. Eventually the worms were nearly gone and the fish were biting less often. I knew it was time to stop. I did not want to wipe out the whole spot. The fish needed time to gather again. I looked into the bucket. It was full and heavy, probably around 7 or 8 pounds of fish. My body was still weak, so I offered the children a share of the catch if they helped carry the bucket back to the village. They nearly fought each other over who got to help. We walked back together, the children chattering loudly. Their noise drew villagers out of their homes. When people saw the full bucket, they were genuinely shocked. They had heard I went fishing, but nobody expected this much. A few who had tried fishing themselves and failed were especially curious about how I had done it. Some of them quietly followed us all the way back to my house. Back home, I cut 2 banana leaves from behind the yard and used them to wrap small portions of fish for each of the children. They ran off happily as if they had received something precious. Some of the villagers who had followed us home asked how I caught so many fish. I told them honestly, earthworms. They were genuinely surprised that worms could be used as bait. I figured the secret would get out anyway since the children had watched everything, so there was no point hiding it. Then I took a breath and asked the villagers something I had been thinking about. I told them our house had not a single grain of rice left, and asked if they could lend us some food, oil, and salt. I promised to pay back double once I found work. One man named Uncle Sean spoke up immediately and said neighbors help each other, and that it was no big deal. The others quickly joined in. One brought half a bag of rice, another brought lard, someone else brought salt, and another brought flatbread that could keep for many days. I was deeply grateful. I bowed again and again to thank them. Then I scooped several large handfuls of fish from the bucket and divided them among the villagers as a gift. They tried to refuse, saying the fish were mine. But I told them honestly that Xiao Yin and I could not eat that much before the fish went bad in the summer heat, and we had no chickens or ducks to feed them to. So they accepted. After they left, I felt relieved. These were good, simple people. With this food, Xiao Yin and I would not have to worry about eating for the next week or two. That gave me some breathing room to figure out how to build a real life in this world. Xiao Yin was already crouching over the flatbread with hungry eyes. I tore off a small piece and gave it to her, then went to the kitchen to cook. I washed rice and got it steaming, then cleaned half a pound of fish. But when I was ready to fry them, I realized there was no cooking pan. The original boy had sold the iron pot to buy food before he died. All that remained was a clay pot for steaming rice. So I found a flat, smooth stone outside, washed it well, and set it over the fire until it was burning hot. Then I scooped a small spoonful of lard onto it. The fat hit the hot stone with a sharp sizzle, melted instantly, and filled the air with a rich, delicious smell. I laid the fish one by one onto the hot stone and fried them slowly, carefully watching the heat. The smell drifted through the house and drew Xiao Yin over. She sat beside me staring at the sizzling fish with wide, hungry eyes. When the rice was ready and the fish were done, I drizzled a little salt water over them and brought everything to the table. I stacked a small stool on her chair so she could reach, then placed the boneless pieces on top of her rice. She ate like a little hamster, cheeks puffed out, not stopping once. She told me the fish was even better than what our mother used to make. That did not make me happy. It made my heart hurt. The fish had barely any seasoning. I had even been careful not to use too much oil to save it. A child only says food like that is the best she has ever tasted when she has been going hungry for a long time. I just smiled and told her to eat more. We finished every last bit of rice and fish together. Mostly me. She was small, and I had been watching that she did not eat too fast and upset her stomach. When she finally put down her bowl and patted her full belly with a satisfied look, I felt genuinely happy. After cleaning up, I came back to find her head already drooping with sleep. I carried her to bed, covered her with her patched blanket, and quietly left the room. I sat down in the old wooden reclining chair in the hall and let out a long breath. My body was still weak, and I had pushed it hard all day, fishing, cooking, carrying things. The tiredness finally hit me all at once. But I could not sleep yet. I needed to think. From everything I had seen today, I was now fairly certain about the kind of world I was in. It was similar to ancient China, with low technology and simple living. Even an iron cooking pot was considered a valuable thing here. There seemed to be no government offices or courts, at least none that the original boy had ever known about. The most powerful figure in nearby towns was apparently someone called a city lord. I needed to visit the town someday. The more I understood about this world, the better I could plan my future. But for now, the most urgent thing was finding a way to feed Xiao Yin and myself, and to repay the villagers who had helped us. My greatest tool was my ability. Quietly, I began to think about what it could really do for us, and then a name quietly rose in my mind. The name that came to my mind was Dr. Chin. He was the only doctor for several villages around here. His medicine was excellent. Fevers, colds, injuries. He could treat almost anything. Even wealthy families in town called on him. The villagers respected him deeply. But what struck me as strange was something the original boy had never thought about. Dr. Chin was clearly quite old, yet his body was strong and healthy. He regularly went alone into the deep mountain forests to gather herbs. These were not safe, gentle hills. They were wild, dangerous mountains full of poisonous insects, snakes, and fierce animals. Even experienced hunters avoided going too deep. Yet this old man came and went freely. That was not normal. I thought about how useful it would be to learn even a little of his medical knowledge. My ability could identify any plant or object instantly. Paired with medical skill, that combination could give Xiao Yin and me a real future. But I fell asleep before I could figure out how to approach him. I did not need to figure it out. He came to me. I woke suddenly to someone holding my wrist. Dr. Chin was sitting beside me taking my pulse, with neighbor Uncle Zhang standing nearby. I lay still and let the old doctor finish. While he worked, I quietly used my ability to look at him. What I saw made my eyes go wide. His body glowed red, a color I had never seen on any person before. Everyone else in the village showed white light, but this was red, and the words that appeared were unlike anything I had seen on a person. They said his name was Chen Songqing, that he was a skilled and kind doctor, and then came the part that shook me. It listed something called cultivation level, describing him as having successfully trained his qi and reached a stage called the postnatal inner organ realm. Cultivation. Qi training. This world was not simply an ancient world like I had assumed. There was something far deeper here. People could cultivate and gain real power. My whole understanding of this world shifted in that moment. Dr. Chen finished his examination and told me my illness was fully gone, just some lingering weakness that would heal with rest. I sat up and tried to bow deeply to thank him for saving my life. He stopped me and said humbly that I had survived by my own fortune and he had only done a small thing. But I could see even he was quietly astonished. He told me later that when he had first seen me, I was nearly dead, cold to the bone, barely breathing. He had given me medicine more out of kindness than real hope. He had even used some rare herbs he had been saving for a wealthy client in town, then rushed back into the mountains the next day to replace them. He had expected me to die. Finding me not only alive, but fishing at the river had shocked him so much that he came straight to see it for himself. Dr. Chen studied me with a puzzled look. He was clearly struggling to understand how someone as sick as I had been could recover overnight. In the end, he simply accepted it as fate and admitted quietly that his medical knowledge had its limits. Then he surprised me. He said that even though I was better, my body was still weak, and he wanted me to come to his place every 3 days so he could treat me with acupuncture to strengthen my foundation. Uncle Zhang immediately told me to thank him, saying the old doctor almost never offered this to anyone. I hesitated and told him honestly I had no money to pay. He waved it off and said my strange recovery puzzled him medically, and treating me would help him learn something too, so it would benefit both of us. I accepted gratefully. Honestly, I had been worrying about how to get close to him, and now the reason had landed right in my lap. Before they left, I ran to the kitchen and came back with 2 bowls of the small fish I had caught. Uncle Zhang immediately scolded me for telling the whole village about the earthworm bait, saying I should have kept it secret so others would not fish the river empty. I told him not to worry. Fishing was not that simple, and knowing the bait alone would not make anyone suddenly good at it. He shook his head at me, but let it go. Dr. Chen said nothing about the bait, but I noticed he accepted the fish without refusing. He knew it was probably all I had to offer, and perhaps all Xiao Yin and I had to eat for the next few days. The fact that I gave it freely told him something about my character. He did not push it back. After I saw them both out and confirmed no one was nearby, I let out a long breath. My heart was pounding. That visit had shaken me deeply, not because of the risk of being discovered as someone other than the original boy, though that had frightened me too. What truly stunned me was what my ability had shown me on Dr. Chen. Cultivation, qi training, realm levels. These were not things that existed in a simple ancient world. These belonged to a world where people could gain extraordinary power, moving like the wind, strength beyond normal humans. The kind of world from the fantasy stories of my previous life. Had I actually been reborn into that kind of world? I sat alone with that thought and felt 3 things all at once: fear, confusion, and a quiet, growing excitement. The realization that I might be living in a world where people could cultivate extraordinary power left me feeling 2 things at once: excited and afraid. Excited because deep down, like anyone who grew up on stories of wandering heroes and martial arts, part of me had always dreamed of that kind of life. Afraid because a world with powerful individuals was also a far more dangerous one. Strong people could crush weak ones without a second thought, and right now, I was completely weak. That thought settled into me like a warning. I needed to change my plans. The next morning, I made river shrimp porridge and woke Xiaoyan. She slurped it happily with a grain of porridge stuck to her cheek. I told her we were going to visit Dr. Chen today instead of fishing. Her face lit up. She had been wanting to thank him herself. Dr. Chen did not live in the village. His small courtyard sat halfway up the hill behind it. When we arrived, I spotted him outside and immediately stopped, pulling Xiaoyan quietly to one side and signaling her to stay silent. He was practicing a form of martial arts. The movements looked slow and gentle at first, almost like the Tai Chi I had seen old men do in parks in my past life. But watching more carefully, I could see every move carried real force behind it, smooth and controlled like flowing water. Then something appeared in my vision that made my heart stop. The word said, "Cultivation method detected. Begin simulation." My ability could copy martial arts techniques. I immediately said yes in my mind. A progress bar appeared and began climbing. I stared at every movement Dr. Chen made, not blinking, barely breathing. The bar reached 50% and then stopped. He had finished his practice. I felt a flash of disappointment, but quickly let it go. Discovering this new function of my ability was already an enormous gain. I would have other chances to watch him practice. There was no rush. Dr. Chen turned and greeted us warmly, saying he had known we were there the whole time, but did not want to break his morning routine. Xiao Yin ran up and grabbed his hand and thanked him for saving my life. He smiled and told her she deserved some credit too. It was her crying that day that had drawn him inside to check on me in the first place. I had not known that. I looked at my little sister with a full heart and bowed deeply to the old doctor once more. He waved it off and stopped trying to explain that my recovery was beyond his understanding. Then Xiao Yin, completely innocent, looked up and asked him what he had just been doing. Was it boxing? I looked at him too, waiting for his answer. When Xiao Yin innocently told Dr. Chen that it was me who had told her to stay quiet, I quickly apologized for interrupting his practice. He waved it off and said it was nothing special, just simple movements to keep his old body loose. Xiao Yin told him it looked beautiful, and he laughed warmly and said getting a compliment like that after a lifetime of practice made it all worthwhile. We followed him into the courtyard. I stopped at the entrance, taken by the sight of dozens of herbs laid out drying in the sun. I recognized one immediately, cowbone grass, the same plant I had found near our home. I wanted to use my ability to identify everything, but there was no time. I asked him casually about the herbs. He confirmed the cowbone grass and said it was used for treating injuries from falls and impact. Then he asked if I was interested in medicine. I said yes honestly, telling him how amazing it seemed that simple plants could ease suffering and save lives. He did not laugh at me. Instead, he explained that learning medicine was not easy. It required sharp thinking, courage, and the ability to read medical texts. I quickly told him I could read a little, which was true. The original boy's grandfather had been a scholar who taught him some characters before passing away. Dr. Chen was surprised and visibly moved. He looked at me more warmly after that and said that every time I came for acupuncture treatment, he would also let me spend half an hour helping him dry and sort herbs, and whatever I could learn and remember was up to me. Then he looked at Xiao Yin and told her to come with me each visit too, saying he would prepare medicinal food for her. Her little body was far too weak. I bowed deeply and thanked him. Xiao Yin thanked him too, even though she had no idea what medicinal food was. Inside, he had me lie down and remove my shirt. He looked at my thin, bony chest silently for a moment, then took out a needle case. Xiao Yin peeked through her fingers nervously, but stayed quiet. One by one, 18 silver needles went into points across my upper body. I was not afraid. I had experienced acupuncture in my past life and knew what to expect. There was no pain at all. When the last needle was in place, Dr. Chen did not let go of it. He gently twisted it between his fingers, and something extraordinary happened. A warm current began flowing through me from where the needle entered, soft and tingling, spreading through my body. A deep heaviness came over my eyes. I fell asleep almost instantly. The last thing I heard before drifting off was Xiao Yin's small voice asking if I had fallen asleep, and Dr. Chen telling her gently that my body needed rest, and that he would take her outside and make her something good to eat. I woke up to the sound of Xiao Yin laughing. The needles were already gone, and someone had laid a thin blanket over me. I got up, dressed, and walked outside to find her sitting with Dr. Chen at a stone table in the courtyard, both of them laughing together. She was holding a piece of white cake in her small hands, looking happier than I had seen her in days. She jumped down and offered me a piece. Dr. Chen explained it was mountain yam cake, good for the lungs, kidneys, and building strength, exactly what my weak body needed. I hesitated, knowing how hard it must have been to gather yams from the dangerous mountain forest. But he spoke so casually about it that refusing further would have been rude. I thanked him and sat down to eat. It was genuinely delicious, soft, fragrant, and sweet. My ability confirmed everything he had said about its medicinal properties. I stopped after a few pieces and did not reach for more, even though I was still hungry. Dr. Chen noticed. I could see him quietly observing me, and something in his expression softened with approval. Then he asked me directly, did I want to learn medicine? I chose my words carefully. I said I would not dare claim such an ambition, but that I had seen how herbs could save lives and I was drawn to it. I explained our situation honestly. Both parents gone, nearly empty house, 2 thin acres of neglected land that could barely feed us. I told him that learning to identify and gather medicinal herbs might be one real way to support Xiao Yin and myself. He nodded and said herb gathering was a valid path, though not an easy one. The mountains were dangerous. I told him that nothing in this world was easy and one had to try. He seemed pleased by that answer and confirmed again that I could stay after each acupuncture session to learn about the herbs. Before we left, I worked up the courage to ask him one more thing. I told him my fishing line kept snapping and asked if he knew of any thread strong enough to make a proper fishing line. He went quiet for a moment, then stood up and walked back inside, telling me to wait. Dr. Chin came back out quickly holding a small box. Inside was a thin coil of nearly transparent white thread. He told me he had received it years ago from an injured wandering swordsman he had saved during his travels. He did not know exactly what it was, only that it was extraordinarily strong and almost impossible to break. I immediately tried to give it back. Something given as a gift for saving a life was not ordinary, and I did not feel right taking it. But he refused to take it back. He said the thread had been sitting in his house for over 10 years with no use, and he had nearly forgotten it existed. He told me if I truly felt grateful, I could simply bring him something good whenever I caught it. He had enjoyed the small fish from yesterday with his drink. I held the box and felt both grateful and ashamed. This old man had been so kind to Xiao Yin and me, and yet I had been quietly trying to copy his martial arts technique with my ability. I made a quiet decision right there. Unless Dr. Chen offered to teach me himself, I would not attempt to simulate his cultivation method again. Coming back down the hill into the village, I saw a group of villagers returning from the river with bamboo poles and buckets, laughing and arguing loudly. They had tried the earthworm bait after hearing about it yesterday. Their buckets held a decent amount of fish, some even larger than what I had caught. One man was furious that a huge fish had snapped his line and gotten away. He insisted it weighed at least 5 pounds. The others all argued it could not have been more than 2. I could not help laughing. This was exactly how it went with fishing friends in my past life. If your line breaks, the fish you lost is always enormous. Apparently, that was the same in every world. The villagers, a little embarrassed to be caught arguing like that in front of 2 children, changed the subject and insisted I take some of their fish as thanks for sharing the bait idea. I tried to refuse, but they would not hear it. In the end, I accepted a small amount from each bucket, enough to make half a pound threaded on a grass string. Back home, I put the fish in the kitchen, then took out Dr. Chin's small box and opened it. I sat quietly, staring at the nearly invisible thread inside. I stared at the thread in the box and activated my ability. A red glow appeared, the same rare color I had only ever seen on Dr. Chin himself. The words told me it was called snow silkworm thread, spun by a rare spiritual creature, extraordinarily tough, resistant to water, fire, and even blades. A true treasure. I sat quietly with that for a moment. The old doctor had casually handed me something genuinely precious without a second thought. I felt both deeply grateful and a little ashamed of myself. Cutting the thread turned out to be a problem. My kitchen chopper went straight through the wood block beneath it without leaving a mark on the thread. Then I remembered what the description had said, resistant to blades. So I tried fire instead, holding a small flame to it. It held for a full 5 minutes before finally burning through. That was enough. I could work with fire. Over the next 2 days, I threw myself into making a proper fishing rod. I spent a whole day selecting bamboo from the grove behind the village, then treated and dried it carefully. When the new rod was finished, my ability showed it glowing white, with words saying it could withstand over 100 pounds of pulling force without breaking. Even the bamboo from this world was extraordinary. The morning I finished it, I showed it to Xiao Yin, and she immediately became my biggest supporter, clapping and calling it beautiful. I told her I had a secret weapon in a small cloth bag that would help us catch a big fish. Her eyes went wide with excitement. She ran ahead of me to the river, bouncing and chanting, big fish, the whole way. A villager named Uncle Zhao stopped to tease her about it. She told him proudly that her brother was the best fisherman around. I apologized for her boldness, but he just laughed and ruffled her hair. When we finally reached the river, we both stopped and stared. My old fishing spot was completely taken over, 7 or 8 villagers all crammed together in that one small area, lines everywhere. They told me it was the best spot they had found, and the fish were biting less now. Of course they were. With that many people fishing the same spot day after day, any fish left would be too frightened to bite. I told them to enjoy it and walked away with Xiao Yin. There was no point being upset. The river belonged to everyone. And with my ability, I could always find a new spot. This time I walked much further than before, past the spots I already knew, going far enough that no one from the village could see us. I did not want a crowd following me again. As I walked slowly along the bank with my ability scanning the water, my eyes suddenly lit up. At a curved bend in the river, I finally found a new fishing spot. My ability showed it glowing white, brighter than any spot I had found before. The word said it was a place where fish loved to feed, and that some kind of special fruit grew nearby that certain rare fish enjoyed eating. I looked up at the bank and spotted several strange trees with small red fruits the size of a fingertip. My ability identified them as blood apricot trees. The fruit was non-toxic but medicinal, and apparently irresistible to certain unusual fish. Xiaoyan immediately wanted to eat one. I told her firmly these were for fishing, not eating. I cleared the surrounding grass with my knife, settled into position, and started with earthworms to secure our food supply first. The very first cast barely hit the water before the float was already moving. Small white fish came up one after another easily. Then after a few catches, the biting suddenly stopped completely. I knew what that meant from experience. Something larger had moved in below and scared the small fish away. I swapped to corn kernels I had borrowed from Aunt Wang that morning. The moment the hook hit the water, before I even had time to sit down, the float shot straight under, and something enormous yanked the rod so hard I nearly stumbled forward. For the next half hour I fought that fish. It ran, I gave line. It tired, I pulled back. My arms burned, but the rod held perfectly, just as my ability had promised. Xiaoyan crouched nearby, squeezing her tiny fists, whispering encouragement too quietly to scare the fish away. When the fish finally surfaced, I could see it was over a meter long, covered in neat shining scales like armor plates. Xiaoyan gasped and said it looked taller than her. She was right. I had no net, so I carefully reached down and lifted it out myself. My ability identified it as a cyan armor fish, a dominant river species. But what truly excited me was the next line. It said the fish contained a fish stone in its throat, and that if taken out and polished, it could calm the spirit and settle the soul. Xiaoyan had been sleeping badly ever since our parents died, waking frightened in the night and needing me to hold her. If this stone could really help her rest peacefully, it was worth more to me than anything. I forced myself not to open the fish right there and controlled my excitement. I propped the fish in the bucket with water to keep it alive and decided to try a little longer with the blood apricot bait. The description had mentioned rare fish that might not be scared off like ordinary ones. Half an hour passed without a single movement from the float. I started putting the rod away, accepting the window had passed. Then the float suddenly plunged straight down into the water. The float shot underwater without any warning, and something powerful yanked the rod so hard I nearly fell in. I caught myself just in time and gripped the rod with both hands. The force was almost as strong as the cyan armor fish had been, but as I fought it I noticed the difference. This fish was not big and heavy like the last one. It had explosive bursts of speed, fast and fierce, but short. Each time it surged I held firm, and each time its strength faded quicker than before. A fast sprinting fish like this was actually easier to handle than a massive slow grinding one. Exactly as I expected, after a few strong rushes the fish began to tire. When it finally surfaced I stopped and stared. It was bright red. A vivid, flame-colored fish about 30 centimeters long, shaped like a carp from my past life, with two long, elegant whiskers at the corners of its mouth and a tail that spread open like a flower. Its red scales caught the light like burning embers. Xiaoyan gasped and said it was the most beautiful fish she had ever seen. I agreed completely. My ability revealed it was called a red moon carp, a rare fish carrying a trace of spiritual essence, with extraordinarily delicious and nourishing flesh, scales that could be used in medicine, and a faint possibility of evolving into something called a spirit fish if properly raised. Its glow was white with a thin thread of red mixed in, somewhere between the two grades I had seen before. 3 description lines. That meant something special. Most white-grade objects only got 2. The third line stayed in my mind. A chance to become a spirit fish. I wondered if that was related to the snow silkworm that had produced Dr. Chin's thread. Perhaps the silkworm was already at that higher level. But the second line mattered more to me right now. Extraordinarily nourishing and delicious. This was the perfect gift for Dr. Chin. I quickly moved the cyan armor fish out of the bucket and put the red moon carp in instead. It had been out of water for a while, but the moment it touched water again it started swimming. Strong creature. My body was spent. 2 major fights in one session was enough. I twisted a grass rope, tied the cyan armor fish across my back, picked up the bucket in one hand and the knife and rod in the other. Xiao Yin insisted on helping, so I hung the worm tube around her neck and rested the fishing rod on her small shoulder. We walked back like that, me bent under the weight of a fish nearly as long as my sister, and her carefully carrying the rod with both hands, stepping slowly and seriously like she had been given the most important job in the world. When we passed the crowded fishing spot, all the villagers stopped and stared at us with their mouths open. When Xiao Yan and I passed the crowded fishing spot, every single villager stopped and stared with their mouths hanging open. One of them stuttered, asking what I had on my back. I told him it was a fish. That simple answer seemed to break something in all of them. A man named Wang Dan quickly offered to carry the cyan armor fish for me. I did not argue. My body was genuinely struggling. I thanked him and handed it over. When he actually lifted it, he yelped, saying it had to be nearly 20 pounds. He looked at my thin frame with clear disbelief that I had pulled it out of the water myself. Then someone noticed the red moon carp glowing in the bucket, and everyone crowded around. They had never seen a redfish before. One of the bolder villagers asked straight out where exactly I had been fishing. The others gave him disapproving looks for being so obvious about it, but he pretended not to care. I told him honestly, just a spot further up the river. Then I advised them not to bother going right now because after fighting 2 large fish, the whole area would be scattered and empty. Some of them nodded along, satisfied with the explanation. We walked back to the village with Wang Dan carrying the big fish. Behind us, I could hear the remaining villagers growing restless. They had been sitting there for 2 or 3 days catching only a handful of small fish, and I had shown up with 2 enormous ones after just a few hours. One by one, they started packing up, saying they would rather go back to the village and watch me clean the fish than keep sitting there for nothing. All of them left, except one man everyone called Old Zhao. He stayed sitting calmly in his spot, saying he would fish a little longer and that maybe the fish would come back. The others shrugged and walked away. A little while later, once he was sure no one was watching, Old Zhao suddenly jumped to his feet and started rushing to pack his things up. He muttered to himself that everyone was a fool for believing what I had said, and that he refused to accept the fish were truly all gone from that spot. Then he grabbed his things and ran off in the direction Xiao Yan and I had come from. We made it back to the village before the other fishermen had even packed up their things. Wang Dan, who had been carrying the cyan armor fish, could not resist showing off the moment we entered the village. He walked straight toward every group of people he saw, fish on his back, grinning widely. The shouts started immediately. Everyone assumed he had caught it himself. They crowded around him, patting the fish, praising him loudly. He soaked it up for a while before finally admitting it was mine. Then Xiao Yin proudly announced there was another fish in the bucket, a more beautiful one. That caused a second wave of amazement. When people looked into the bucket and saw the red moon carp glowing red like a flame underwater, they went completely silent for a moment before all speaking at once. Nobody had ever seen a red fish before. I told them honestly I did not know what it was and planned to bring it to Dr. Chen the next day. Everyone agreed that made sense. He was the most knowledgeable person any of us knew. After a long time of crowding around and talking about the fish, the villagers slowly drifted away. I invited a few to come eat with us, but they all refused, knowing our situation. The ones who were tempted were quickly pulled away by others before they could say yes. Back in the yard, Wang Dan tried to leave right after setting the fish down. I stopped him and insisted he stay for the meal as promised. He refused, saying if he actually ate at my house his father would hit him with a stick when he got home. We went back and forth until I changed my approach. I told him the fish was too large for Xiao Yin and me to finish, and that in this heat the meat would spoil quickly. Taking some would be helping me, not taking advantage. That worked. He agreed. Cleaning the cyan armor fish was hard work. The scales were incredibly tough and took both of us a long time to remove. Once it was open, I set aside the organs. I would have loved to cook the liver and intestines since I genuinely enjoyed them, but without enough seasoning there was no way to handle that level of fishy smell properly. I had to let it go. I immediately cut 2 large portions of meat, wrapped them in banana leaves, and handed them to Wang Dan. He stared at the size of the pieces and said it was too much. I pushed them into his hands anyway. As he was leaving, he suddenly brightened up and suggested I take fish to the market to sell, then use the money to buy grain. I told him I thought getting into town required an entry fee I did not have. He laughed, and said he was not talking about the city. He meant the large open market not far from our village. I blinked at him. A large market? After Wang Dan mentioned the market, I searched through my memories and found something. There was a large open market nearby where villagers from several surrounding villages gathered every 5 days to trade. No entry fee, no long journey to town. The original boy had gone once as a small child with his parents, but the memory was faint. Wang Dan explained that even mountain dwellers came down to trade there occasionally. He was confident my large fish would sell easily as long as I did not price them too high. I told him I would try next time I caught something worth selling. He told me to come find him first since there were certain things about the market worth knowing in advance. After he left, I set to work. I cut several portions of meat to send to Uncle Zhang later. He had looked after Xiao Yin during the days I was unconscious, and I had not forgotten that. The rest of the fish meat I threaded on bamboo strips and hung under the roof to dry into preserved fish. Looking at that long row of meat, I made myself a quiet promise. I needed to get an iron pot as soon as possible. And proper seasoning. I had real cooking ability, but almost nothing to work with, and watching good ingredients go to waste genuinely hurt. Once the porridge was ready, I added a little salt, stirred it through, then gently laid the thin fish slices in and watched them turn white before pulling the pot off the heat. A small spoonful of lard went in last. I blew on Xiao Yin's bowl and set it in front of her, warning her it was still hot. She stared at it without blinking, hands in her lap, waiting obediently. I tried mine first. The moment it hit my tongue, I stopped moving. The fish was silky, fresh, faintly rich with the lard. Astonishingly good for something made with only salt and oil and no herbs at all. Truly fine ingredients needed almost nothing done to them. Xiao Yin took her first spoonful carefully, blowing on it the way she had seen me do, then put it in her mouth. Her eyes went wide immediately. She waved both hands and told me this was even better than the shrimp porridge, then called me the best brother in the world. I told her Dr. Chen had said eating well would make her hair grow beautiful and strong. She nodded with complete seriousness and said she would eat very hard. My chest tightened a little. A few days ago, she had come home upset because some village children had teased her about her dry yellow hair. She did not know it was from being underfed for so long. I had just told her that eating properly would fix it, and she had believed me completely and taken it to heart. After we finished, we both sat back in our chairs feeling deeply satisfied. Even I had not expected the cyan armor fish to taste that good. Then I thought about the red moon carp, described by my ability as extraordinarily delicious. That was going to Dr. Chen as a gift, so I would never know. I got up and went back to the kitchen. There was still one more thing to do. The fish stone inside the cyan armor fish was waiting. I waited until Wang Dan had left before going to deal with the fish stone. I had not wanted to take it out in front of him. Too difficult to explain. The large fish head was sitting in a wooden basin in the kitchen. I broke it open carefully and found the stone right where my ability had said it would be, in the throat. I was surprised the moment I touched it. Fish stones from my past life came out soft and gelatinous and needed weeks of drying and treatment. This one was already hard, fully solid, smooth, and warm to the touch, shaped like a small scallop shell about 2 centimeters across. It looked and felt like polished jade. My ability confirmed it. The stone had fully jade-fied, and wearing it close to the body would calm the spirit and settle the soul. I found a small tool and carefully drilled a hole through the thin end. It was hard but not as tough as real jade, so it did not take long. Then I twisted some remaining rope into a cord and threaded the stone onto it. I called Xiao Yin inside and dangled it in front of her. Her eyes went wide immediately. I tied it around her neck and told her that wearing it would stop her from kicking off her blankets at night, which was true in a deeper sense than she knew. I made the loop small enough that she could not pull it off over her head and lose it. She touched it over and over, completely delighted. It was the first piece of jewelry she had ever owned. That evening I cooked the fish head, half roasted over the stone, half simmered into soup. We ate until we were genuinely full. At bedtime, Xiao Yin lay on her small bed patting her full belly, telling me the big fish was delicious. I tucked in her blanket and told her to sleep well since we were visiting Dr. Chen again tomorrow. She fell asleep mid-sentence, one hand resting on the pendant at her throat. I lay down on my own bed and listened to her quiet breathing. I could not sleep yet. My mind was turning over the next day's visit to Dr. Chen, how to deepen his trust in me, and the market that Wang Dan had mentioned. The borrowed grain and oil would run out within days. I needed to find a way to earn money soon. The market felt like the right starting point. but I still did not know its rules or how it worked. Thinking it all over, my eyes gradually grew heavy and I drifted off. The house was quiet, both of us sleeping. Outside, a cool night breeze moved through the yard under a sky full of stars. Then a dark shadow leapt silently over the wall and moved toward the fish meat hanging to dry under the roof. That night, I slept more deeply than I had since arriving in this world. And for the first time since our parents died, Xiao Yin did not wake up crying in the middle of the night. The fish stone pendant was already working. She was actually the one who woke me up in the morning. After I helped her dress and wash her face and tied her hair into 2 small bunches, I started brushing my own teeth with a willow stick. My eyes drifted lazily toward the roof, and then I stopped. The 2 bamboo strips where I had hung the fish meat were empty. Someone had stolen the fish. My first thought was a villager, but I dismissed it quickly. Nobody in this village was desperate enough to steal 2 pieces of fish, especially after refusing my invitation to eat for free just yesterday. And whoever took it had yanked the meat off roughly. No careful thief would make that kind of noise. I searched around and found small flower-shaped muddy prints on the wall and the ground. My ability showed them glowing white and told me they belonged to some kind of mysterious small animal with sharp claws. A wild creature from the mountains behind the village. That made much more sense. I felt relieved it was not a person. I just needed to be more careful closing up at night. Then I suddenly remembered the red moon carp and ran to the kitchen in a panic. It was fine. I had covered the basin with a wooden board and a heavy stone the night before. I let out a long breath. I did not mention any of this to Xiao Yin. We ate breakfast and headed up to Dr. Chen's place, with the red moon carp in the bucket. I deliberately left a little later than last time. I did not want to arrive while he was still practicing his martial arts and be tempted to use my ability to copy his technique again. He had been far too good to us for me to repay him that way. The timing worked perfectly. When we arrived, he was just finishing his practice, slowly settling into his final stance. Xiao Yin ran to him immediately, and he scooped her up with a warm laugh. Then she proudly told him about the giant fish, waving her arms to show how big it was. When she pulled out the pendant from under her collar to show him, the old doctor's expression changed. He recognized it immediately. He called it a cyan armor fish stone and said the fish must have been very old to have produced one with such a perfect jade quality. He explained it could calm the spirit and that its powder dissolved in water could even stop night terrors in small children. Then he looked at me and asked where exactly I had caught that fish. When Dr. Chen asked where I had caught the fish, I told him simply, the river outside the village. He was surprised that such an old cyan armor fish could live in such a small river, but reasoned that nobody in the surrounding villages fished much, so it had been left alone to grow. Then I cleared the leaves from the bucket and showed him the red moon carp. His expression changed the moment he saw it. He set Xiao Yin down and leaned in close, studying the fish carefully before confirming what it was. He looked at me with genuine astonishment and asked how I had possibly caught one. He explained to both of us that the red moon carp was one of the rarest fish in the world, famous across the land for its extraordinary flavor, considered one of the 10 greatest delicacies in existence. He had tasted it once at a wealthy nobleman's banquet, and the memory clearly still stayed with him. I told him it was meant as a gift for him. He immediately refused, then told me what one of these fish could sell for in the city. 100 silver taels. I genuinely went still for a moment. In this world, 1 silver tael could feed a family of 3 for a month. The entire Lu family at its most prosperous had probably never held 10 taels at once. Dr. Chen told me he would take the fish to the city and sell it on my behalf, and that the money should go toward our living expenses. I tried to insist he keep it. He laughed warmly and refused again. We agreed that whatever it sold for, the cost of the medicine he had given me would come out first. He agreed to that, though he quietly said nothing about the fact that the rare herbs he had added to that medicine were worth nearly as much as the fish itself. He mentioned the fish was slightly larger than ideal. The most prized red moon carps were around 2 pounds, tender, and at peak flavor. Mine had grown past that, so the price would be somewhat lower. Even so, I was not going to complain. After the acupuncture session, which was shorter than the last one, I woke to find Xiao Yin and Dr. Chen already chatting and laughing outside over another plate of mountain yam cake. When I joined them and had eaten a few pieces, Dr. Chen stood and invited me inside. He came back holding a book and placed it in my hands, a copy of the 100 Herbs Classic, filled with the names, illustrations, and growing habits of medicinal plants. He told me to study it, compare it against the herbs drying in the yard, and ask him anything I did not understand. I was stunned. Books in this world were genuinely precious. Paper and ink both cost money, and most village families never owned one at all. I took the book outside to a quiet corner and opened it. But after a few pages I frowned. Many of the characters were rare and unusual, beyond what either the original boy or my own past life knowledge covered. Reading it was going to be slow and difficult. I told myself to treat it like studying for my university entrance exams and kept going. Then the pages began to glow white. 2 lines appeared describing the book. Then a 3rd line appeared that stopped me completely. It asked, "Do you wish to download it?" I stared at the words floating above the book. "Do you wish to download it?" I chose yes without hesitating. A progress bar appeared but did not move. I quickly understood. I needed to actually read through the pages. As I turned each one, the bar climbed steadily until it hit 100%. Then a new prompt appeared asking if I wanted to learn the contents. I said yes again. The next moment, a flood of information poured through my mind, settling in like something had been poured directly into my memory. Names, appearances, growing habits, medicinal uses, hundreds of herbs, all absorbed and understood within moments. From the outside, I must have looked like I was simply staring blankly at the pages. When I came back to myself, I sat quietly for a while, genuinely humbled by how much there was to know. The 100 Herbs Classic contained several hundred plants, and that was barely a fraction of what existed in the world. The way they combined and interacted to heal different ailments was extraordinary. I kept reading anyway, reviewing what I had just absorbed. Dr. Chen eventually came outside to check on me, expecting to be asked questions. When he saw me sitting absorbed in the book with Xiao Yin quietly chasing butterflies in the corner, he smiled to himself and went back inside. Then urgent voices came from outside the yard. Several villagers rushed in carrying an unconscious man, old Zhao, the same man who had snuck off after us at the river yesterday. He was completely soaked. His face had gone a dark bluish color, and his belly was swollen with water. Dr. Chen immediately took charge, cleared the yard, and checked that nothing was blocking the airway. Then he pressed both hands firmly into old Zhao's chest and abdomen in a steady rhythm. Each press brought up a gush of dirty water. After more than 10 careful compressions, old Zhao suddenly coughed, then opened his eyes. The watching villagers erupted in relieved shouting. I moved quietly to Wang Dan, who had stepped back near me, and asked what had happened. He told me old Zhao had gone alone to fish, at the spot where I had caught the big fish yesterday. They heard him shouting, ran over, and found him already in the river being carried downstream, barely keeping his head above water. When they pulled him out, he was still gripping his fishing rod tightly, but the line had snapped. I went quiet for a moment. Based on years of fishing experience, I already had a good idea of what had happened. A big fish had hit his line. He had tried to hold on instead of letting it run, and the force had pulled him right into the water. And he could not swim. Old Zhao blinked around at everyone surrounding him and asked weakly where he was. Old Zhao looked around in confusion as the villagers filled him in all at once. When he suddenly remembered and asked about his fishing rod, one of the men told him they had left it on the bank. They were too busy saving his life to carry it. Old Zhao actually seemed upset about that, which immediately annoyed everyone who had just risked themselves pulling him from the river. After a moment of heated words, he apologized and calmed down. Then someone asked the real question: how had he ended up in the water in the first place? He looked embarrassed and finally admitted he had jumped in himself. He had felt a huge fish take his line and pull his rod away, and without thinking he had leapt in to get it back, not realizing how deep the water was. I stood nearby and said nothing. I had already guessed that was what happened. I had seen it plenty of times before, and embarrassingly had done something similar myself once. But at least I could swim. The other villagers scolded him loudly, saying his rod could be replaced with a piece of bamboo from the hillside. What was he thinking, nearly drowning himself over a fishing rod? What he did not say out loud, but what I could easily imagine, was that it was not really about the rod. He had seen my 2 enormous fish the day before and could not let the chance slip away. The big fish had been real, and he had not wanted to lose it. Dr. Chen then delivered the serious news. Old Zhao had been in the cold water too long. The chill had entered deep into his body. He had swallowed a large amount of river water and damaged his internal organs. He had also stopped breathing for a period. Dr. Chen had cleared the water from his body and brought him back, but the damage was real. He would need careful rest for a long time, and how well he recovered depended on how seriously he took that rest. Old Zhao panicked and asked if he would ever walk properly again. Dr. Chen told him walking was not in question, but recovery would be slow at his age. A short while later, his family arrived. 2 sons, a daughter-in-law, and his wife, all rushing in after being notified. His wife immediately burst into tears and scolded him through her crying, asking why he had gone to the river when she had told him not to, and whether he had wanted to die and leave her alone. His sons gently asked him to give up fishing entirely, saying they would get him whatever food he wanted. There was no need to take such risks. He agreed, red-faced and ashamed. Then one of the villagers mentioned what Dr. Chen had said about lasting damage, and the whole family went still with shock. Old Zhao was carried home by his 2 sons while his wife scolded him the whole way. Dr. Chen had given him acupuncture and some medicine before he left, and his color had already improved. Once the commotion settled, the other villagers began drifting away. That was when they finally noticed me standing quietly in the corner with Xiao Yan. Wang Dan asked if I was leaving too. I told him I still had things to learn from Dr. Chen. When he saw the book in my hands, he understood. The reaction from the other villagers surprised me. I expected jealousy, and there was some, but it was much milder than I anticipated. Instead, most of them seemed genuinely pleased and even encouraging. One older man patted my shoulder and told me to learn everything the old doctor knew. I nodded, a little confused. After everyone left, Dr. Chen came to stand beside me. He seemed to know exactly what I was puzzling over. He asked if I was wondering why the villagers wanted me to learn medicine rather than resenting it. Then he told me something I had not known. Before he arrived 10 years ago, there had not been a single doctor in any of the surrounding villages. When people got sick, they boiled whatever herbs they recognized, visited local folk healers, or simply endured the illness and hoped it passed. Only when things became truly desperate did anyone attempt the long, costly trip to the city doctor. And by that point, a small illness had usually become a serious one. Many people died every year from conditions that could have been treated early. Dr. Chen had been traveling through the area when he saw how many people were suffering with nowhere to turn. He stopped to help, intending to stay only briefly. 10 years passed. He said quietly that he had never cured everyone, but at least people now had somewhere to go before a small problem became a deadly one. I sat with that for a moment. This old man had quietly given a decade of his life to people who had nothing to offer him in return. Then I understood why the villagers reacted the way they did. They were not jealous of me learning medicine. They were hopeful. They had lived through years of having no doctor, and they were afraid of going back to that. If Dr. Chen was ever gone, they needed someone who could help them. I asked him if he was bothered by people whispering about what would happen when he died. He laughed and said it was only human nature, and that he was indeed very old. I thought about the red cultivation glow I had seen on him and said nothing. Then Dr. Chen looked at me directly and asked a question I had not expected. He asked if I would like to learn medicine from him properly. I stared at Dr. Chen, not sure I had heard correctly. He wanted me to learn medicine properly as his student? He explained that the village elder's words earlier had reminded him of something real. The village needed a doctor for the future, and I was the only young person in the area who could read. He wanted to give me the chance, but he added a condition. Medicine required real ability. If within 1 month I could memorize all the herb names and medicinal properties in the 100 Herbs Classic, he would officially take me as his apprentice. If I could not manage that, I should stick to herb gathering as a simpler livelihood. I told him I would work hard. Inside, I was quietly laughing. I had already memorized the entire book, but I could not show that. If I recited it perfectly right now, he would be alarmed, not impressed. I needed to let him see progress gradually, at a pace that felt believable. So I spent the rest of the session asking him questions about difficult characters and unusual herb names, letting him explain things I already understood and pretending to absorb them slowly. It was genuinely tiring work, acting less capable than I was. But Dr. Chen seemed pleased, remarking more than once that my memory was impressively sharp. Before we left, he told me not to wait 3 days, come back tomorrow. He did not want me forgetting what I had learned. Xiao Yan immediately asked if that meant she could come back tomorrow too. He laughed and said he would make her a new kind of cake to try. Walking back down the hill, I felt genuinely happy. The red moon carp would bring in real money once Dr. Chen sold it in the city. I now knew blood apricot fruit attracted them, which meant I could catch more. And most importantly, I had been offered the chance to study medicine properly. By the time Xiao Yan and I reached the village, word had already spread everywhere. A group of villagers were gathered under the big tree at the center of the village talking about it. They were not jealous, they were hopeful. They remembered the years before Dr. Chen arrived, when people got sick and simply had to endure it alone, and sometimes did not survive. Having someone new learning medicine meant they might never have to go back to those days. Then someone called out that we were coming, and everyone turned to look at us. When Xiao Yin and I returned to the village, the crowd under the big tree greeted us warmly. One elder told me to study hard. Others said to come to them if I ever needed help. I looked at their sincere faces and felt something settle quietly inside me. Before leaving Dr. Chen's place, he had told me why he had chosen our village to settle in all those years ago. In decades of traveling, he had lived in hundreds of villages. Rich ones, poor ones, kind ones, suspicious ones. Ours was rare. The people here helped each other naturally, without resentment, and disputes never hardened into lasting hatred. That simple goodness had made him stay. Standing there looking at the villagers' faces, I felt genuinely grateful to have been reborn here rather than somewhere harder. Back home, I sent Xiao Yin to play and sat down with the 100 Herbs Classic again. Now that I knew the Red Moon Carp would bring real money once Dr. Chen sold it, the urgency around earning had eased a little. What mattered most right now was passing his test. A few villagers came by wanting to ask about fishing techniques after seeing yesterday's catch, but when they saw me reading, they quietly left without disturbing me. Dinner was fish again with some wild vegetables I picked from the yard. Once it got dark, I put the book away. We could not afford lamp oil. Even so, after a full afternoon of review, I felt completely confident. If Dr. Chen tested me right now, I could pass easily. At bedtime, Xiao Yin announced she was not sleepy and refused to close her eyes. I tried to reason with her, but she just asked for a story, specifically the one about the little monkey that I had started telling her 2 nights ago when she woke up crying. I sighed and gave in. I told her the story of the Monkey King, piecing it together from half-remembered impressions since I had never read the original closely. I filled in the gaps with my own words. It did not matter. She was completely absorbed. By the time the little monkey was almost ready to be crowned king, her eyes had already closed, and she was breathing deeply, one hand resting on the fish stone pendant at her throat. I pulled her blanket up gently and turned toward my own bed. Then I heard a sound from outside. The sound from outside made me freeze. I grabbed the stick I kept near my bed and crept quietly into the main room. Whatever it was scratching or pawing at the door. I banged the stick hard against it, and the noise stopped immediately. I stood still for a long time listening before I finally went back to bed, but I barely slept the whole night, too worried about Xiao Yin to fully close my eyes. The next morning at Dr. Chen's place, I arrived with dark circles under my eyes. He assumed I had stayed up reading and started lecturing me about the importance of rest for a future doctor. I told him that was not what happened and explained about the creature. He went inside and came back with a small packet of powder, a blend he had made himself from herbs that repel animals and insects, something he carried whenever he traveled through the mountains. He told me to sprinkle it around the house, and the creature would likely stay away. I thanked him genuinely. I had been hesitant to set traps because the footprints had glowed white in my ability's vision, which meant whatever left them was not ordinary. I did not want to provoke something I did not understand. After that, we returned to the 100 Herbs Classic. Dr. Chen was visibly impressed by how much I had absorbed since the day before. He commented that I must have worked hard the previous evening. I accepted the praise quietly without telling him the truth. He advised me to start comparing the book's descriptions against real plants in the area. Knowing the written knowledge was one thing, but identifying actual herbs in the field was different. Then he mentioned he would be going into the city the next day to deliver medicine to a pharmacy and would sell the Red Moon Carp while he was there. I immediately said I had things I wanted him to buy. He asked what. I told him an iron pot. Our only one had been sold during the difficult period before I arrived. And salt, which was running low. He agreed to both. I held back from asking for more even though I needed oil, grain, clothing, and other things. He was already doing me a great kindness. The other items I could get at the village market later. Back home, I scattered the powder carefully all around the house. I felt confident the problem was solved. That night, after Xiao Yin fell asleep, I heard the sound again. The scratching sound was back. Dr. Chen's powder had not worked at all. 2 nights of bad sleep had worn my patience thin, and I decided I needed to see what this creature actually was. I crept to the front door, then yanked it open suddenly. A dark shape shot out into the yard and froze near the fence, staring back at me. In the moonlight, I could finally see it clearly. It was a small black animal, about 2 feet long, shaped somewhere between a cat and a leopard, with 2 enormous eyes that glowed like lamps in the dark. Its fur was puffed out, and its body was low to the ground, tense and watchful. I looked at it carefully and activated my ability. Red light appeared around it. The description said it was a black night spirit leopard, a spiritual beast, still a juvenile, female, extraordinarily fast, claws sharp enough to crack stone and split metal, and it had an intense love of fish, but a natural hatred of water, meaning it could never catch any itself. I nearly dropped my stick. This tiny creature was the same grade as Dr. Chen. The powder had not worked because it was not an ordinary animal. It was a spirit beast, and those claws could tear through stone. I carefully hid the stick behind my back and smiled as calmly as I could. I went quietly to the kitchen and came back with 2 pieces of dried fish. The creature's enormous eyes followed the fish the moment it saw them. I tossed the pieces gently onto the ground away from it, then stood still and waited. The creature watched me without moving for a long moment. Then, once it seemed sure I was not a threat, it blurred forward in an instant. I barely saw it move, and the fish were gone. Then it leapt over the fence and vanished into the dark. I went back inside and lay down. My heart was pounding properly now that the danger had passed. That thing could tear through stone with its claws. If it had felt threatened, it could have killed me without effort. The only reason we were both fine was that it was timid and wanted fish, not a fight. I stared at the ceiling thinking about this. The creature was a juvenile, which meant it had probably been driven away from its parents or lost them somehow. And I had a strong feeling it would come back, which meant I could not put fishing aside the way I had been planning to. I needed to keep catching fish, not just for myself and Xiaoyan, but apparently now for a red-grade spirit beast that had decided my house was worth visiting. I let out a long, tired sigh in the dark. That night, I finally slept well. The creature did not return after I had given it the fish, and I woke up feeling genuinely rested for the first time in days. The next morning, I took Xiaoyan fishing at one of the other spots I had found earlier. Not the rare fish spot, just a regular white-grade location. I caught a decent half bucket of fish in about an hour, including a grass carp weighing a couple of pounds and various smaller ones. That should be enough to keep the spirit beast fed for several nights. Sure enough, that evening after Xiaoyan fell asleep, the scratching came again. This time I was ready. I opened the door calmly with a wooden basin of fish already prepared. The creature was standing in the middle of the yard, much calmer than the night before, still watchful, but not puffed up with fear. I set the basin down gently, stepped back inside, and waited. It darted forward in a blur, grabbed the largest fish, and disappeared. A few minutes later, it came back for another. I watched for a while, then went to bed, leaving it to eat in peace. When I checked in the morning, the basin was empty. More than 2 pounds of fish, all gone. The little creature had quite an appetite. I put it out of my mind, packed some fresh small fish as a gift for Dr. Chen since he had mentioned enjoying them, and headed up the hill with Xiaoyan. Dr. Chen had just finished his morning exercises. He asked right away if the powder had kept the animal away. I told him honestly it had not worked at all. The creature had come back both nights. He was genuinely surprised, saying nothing should be able to ignore that mixture. I described what I had done instead, leaving fish out for it. He asked me to describe the animal. I told him it was black, about 2 feet long, with white paws and a white patch at the throat. He thought carefully, then shook his head. In all his decades of traveling, he had never seen or heard of an animal matching that description. I hid my surprise. Even he did not know what it was. He said that since the creature showed no aggression and only wanted food, there was no need to drive it away. I agreed, and privately I had no intention of trying anyway, given what my ability had told me about those claws. Xiaoyan had been listening and immediately asked if she could see the creature next time I fed it. I told her it only came after she was asleep. She looked a little hurt and asked if it disliked her. I told her it was probably just shy and would come around once it felt more comfortable with us. Then I handed Dr. Chen the fish, and he told me the things I had asked him to buy were already inside waiting for me. Inside the house, I found a brand new iron pot sitting on the floor. Dr. Chen came out of the back room carrying a cloth bag and handed it to me. The weight of it surprised me. He told me the red moon carp had sold for the full 100 taels. The nobleman he delivered medicine to had a wife who needed nourishment, and the moment he heard about the fish, he paid the highest price without bargaining. Dr. Chen said simply that my luck had been good. After deducting 10 taels for my medical treatment, and 5 more for the iron pot and salt, 85 taels remained. I looked inside the bag at the silver ingots and loose silver pieces. He had already broken some of it into smaller amounts for daily use. I tried to question the 10 taels for medicine, but held back. Knowing what I did about the rare herbs he had used on me, I suspected he had actually charged me far less than the real cost. Then he told me he had already seasoned the iron pot for me the previous night, so it was ready to use immediately. I tried to pay him for the pork fat he had used, and he waved me off, saying it was nothing worth counting. I felt genuinely moved. This man kept giving without making any show of it. Then he told me to lie down. This was the third and final acupuncture session. After this, my foundation was stable enough that I no longer needed the treatment. Just rest and good food going forward. I fell asleep almost as soon as the last needle went in. When I woke up, everything felt different. Not the temporary surge of energy from before. This felt real and settled, like my body had finally come back to itself properly. I got dressed and walked outside. Dr. Chen and Xiao Yin were sitting at the stone table as always. She had a piece of cake in her hand and was swinging her feet and laughing at something he had said, her head tilted back with pure happiness. The scene looked almost exactly the same as the first time I had woken up here after acupuncture. But everything else was different now. That first time I had been weak, penniless, and barely surviving. Now my body was recovered. I had over 80 taels of silver, and I had been offered the chance to learn medicine from one of the most remarkable people I had ever met. I stood in the doorway looking at my little sister laughing in the morning light and felt something quiet and steady settle in my chest. Everything had changed. I carried the iron pot home openly rather than trying to hide it. There was no point sneaking. The smell of stir-fried food would give it away the moment I started cooking anyway. As expected, it caused a stir in the village. An iron pot was a luxury that many families still could not afford. I told everyone Dr. Chen had given it to me, which made the villagers shake their heads in amazement at his generosity and further convinced them he truly valued me as a student. I had been smart enough to leave most of the silver with Dr. Chen and only bring a small amount home. If I had walked through the village with a bag full of silver ingots, people would have noticed. That evening, I cooked with the iron pot for the first time. Fried fish, fish soup, and stir-fried greens. The moment I tasted the vegetables, I felt something loosen in my chest. That was the flavor I had been missing since arriving in this world. Stir-frying was completely different from boiling and steaming. The heat, the oil, the smell. Even Xiao Yin, who usually avoided vegetables, ate every last bite. After dinner, I sat outside in the old reclining chair watching the evening sky and thought about the market. The cooking oil was nearly gone after tonight's generous use. I also needed to repay the villagers who had lent us things in those first difficult days. The market was the right place to handle all of that. I decided to go the next morning and visit Wang Dan first to learn the rules. Xiao Yin announced she was going to stay awake that night and finally see the spirit beast. I told her she could try. The fish stone had other plans for her. She was asleep within the hour. The scratching came not long after. The creature was noticeably more relaxed this time, standing in the middle of the yard without its fur raised. When I set the fish down and stepped back, it moved forward almost immediately, grabbed the largest piece, and ran. It came back several more times until everything was gone. I watched for a moment, then went to bed. I had things to do tomorrow. In the morning, the basin was empty again, 2 or 3 pounds of fish completely finished. When Xiao Yin woke up and saw the empty basin, she was genuinely upset that she had missed it again. She declared firmly that tonight she absolutely would not fall asleep. I told her good luck and meant it in the most affectionate way possible. I left her with Uncle Zhang next door, tucked a small piece of silver into my pocket, and headed over to Wang Dan's house. I went to Wang Dan's house and found him just coming outside. His grandfather appeared too, a kind old man who tried to pull me inside for water. I thanked him and said I just needed a quick word with Dun. I told Dun I wanted to go to the market today and remembered he had said there were rules I needed to know first. He slapped his forehead. Today was market day, exactly 5 days since the last one. His grandfather overheard and told Dun to take me, saying I was head of my household now and should learn how things worked. Dun was happy to agree since it meant escaping the chore of cutting pig grass. At the village entrance, he stopped at the large ancient tree that stood there. Every child in the village had been warned since birth never to climb or play near it. I had always assumed it was simply a sacred tree for offerings. Turns out it had a practical purpose too. Dun lifted a stone at the base and pulled out 2 red cords. He pointed to different branches, left for the market, middle for the city, right for anywhere else. Whenever someone left the village, they tied a cord to the matching branch. When they returned, they took it down. That way, if someone did not come back, the villagers would know where to start looking. I started to ask about leaving name tags, then stopped myself. remembering that almost no one in the village could read or write. Dunn laughed and said the village was small enough that if a cord stayed up too long, one question to the neighbors would tell you who was missing. He also explained that going to the market alone was acceptable. Just tie the cord and go. But traveling to the city required at least 2 people for safety. If no one from our village was heading that way, you could check with neighboring villages for company. I asked if the road to the city was dangerous. He paused and said it was generally peaceful now, but his grandfather remembered a time when bandits had been active on the roads. A man from a neighboring village had been captured and held for years before finally escaping home. Everyone had assumed he was dead. After that incident, the local city lord had sent soldiers to clear out the bandits, and several villages had established the current rules as a precaution. Bandits. I filed that away quietly. I also heard him mention the city lord and a county magistrate in the same breath. More pieces of how this world was organized to think about later. Don tied both our red cords to the left branch, and we headed off toward the market together. The market was busier than I had imagined. Rows of organized stalls selling meat, cloth, and grain, with a large open area further back where anyone could set up temporarily for 1 copper coin. Wang Dun pointed out the man in charge of collecting the temporary stall fees, a lean middle-aged man in blue cloth named Master Ma. When I looked his way, he turned and looked directly back at us from a considerable distance, his gaze sharp before softening when he saw 2 poorly dressed village boys. I looked away carefully. Someone who could sense a distant gaze like that was not ordinary. My ability confirmed it. He was a cultivator, at the early stage of what was called the postnatal sinubone realm. His glow was white, not red like Dr. Chin's. So they were both cultivators, but at different levels. The inner organ realm was apparently higher than the sinubone realm. I filed that away and kept moving. My first stop was the meat stall. I had not eaten proper meat in a long time. I picked out 2 large pieces of fatty pork and some leaner cuts. When I held out my silver, the stall owner looked uncomfortable and said he had just opened for the day and had no way to make change for something that heavy. Wang Dun pulled me aside in a panic and whispered that nobody came to the open market with silver. Everything here ran on copper coins. I told him I had no copper, only this piece of silver, and I had a lot of things to buy. Before we could figure it out, Master Ma appeared behind us, having overheard the commotion. The stall owner and Dun both bowed nervously. Even I felt the quiet pressure in his presence. He asked calmly where a boy dressed like me had gotten silver. I pushed back gently and asked if people needed to explain their money at a market. He smiled and apologized, saying he was simply surprised. I hesitated, then told him it came from my teacher. He asked who my teacher was. I said I did not know his formal name. People just called him the old Dr. Chin. Master Ma's expression changed completely. Master Ma's expression shifted the moment I mentioned Dr. Chin. The confidence drained from his face, and he became notably more careful. I told him I was only a beginner student learning about herbs, not yet able to treat patients. He seemed to relax slightly at my humility and offered to pay for my meat as an apology for questioning me. I refused. He offered again. I refused again. Wang Dan was silently screaming beside me. It was a lot of free meat, but he trusted me enough not to interfere. Master Ma tried a different approach and offered to break my silver into copper coins instead, since no one at the market used silver for ordinary purchases. That I accepted. It was a practical offer with no obligation attached. He weighed the silver, said it was about 6 chien, worth roughly 600 copper coins, then handed me a cloth bag. I counted every coin in front of him without embarrassment. He watched me count, and I could see him revising his opinion of me upward. Most village people could barely count past 100. There were 650 coins inside. I pointed out the extra 50. He said the silver was high quality and the extra was fair. I thanked him and accepted it. I had already refused him several times. Refusing again would have been rude and unnecessarily cold. After he left, Wang Den let out a long breath and told me that was the most politely he had ever seen Master Ma treat anyone. I bought the pork. The stall owner knocked off a few coins once he heard I was Dr. Chin's student, saying the old doctor had once saved his wife's life. Then Dun and I walked through the rest of the market together. By the time we finished, I had bought a large amount of grain, cooking oil, daily supplies, vegetable seeds for the yard, and some needles and thread to make more fishing hooks. I also noticed fish being sold at the market for less than pork. In this world, fatty meat was more valuable to poor people than lean fish, since fat meant energy. Only the wealthy paid premium prices for fresh fish. Most of my 650 copper coins were spent. I bought 2 large bamboo backpacks to carry everything, and Don and I loaded ourselves up with the supplies. We walked back toward the village with heavy steps, but satisfied hearts. Our large purchase at the market had drawn some attention. I was aware of this and stayed alert on the walk back, but nothing happened, and we made it to the village without incident. We untied the red cords from the tree, put them back under the stone, and carried everything to my house. What I did not know was what happened after we left. A small group of rough-looking men outside the market had been eyeing us, tempted by the meat and supplies we were carrying. Their leader was hesitant. He had seen how respectfully Master Ma had treated me, and provoking that man's interest was not worth a few pounds of pork. While they were still arguing about it, Master Ma sent one of his men outside to warn them off. The sounds of their protests and apologies drifted into the market briefly. Inside, Master Ma sat quietly thinking about me. He already knew Dr. Chen by reputation, not just as a village healer, but as someone respected by powerful people in the city, a martial arts master close to the peak of what was called the postnatal grandmaster realm. Many wealthy and influential people sought his company. Master Ma had wanted to get close to Dr. Chen for years, but never found a way in. My appearance today gave him an idea. He sent a man to quietly confirm whether I was truly the old doctor's student. Back at my house, Wang Dan set down his load with a long exhale. I thanked him sincerely. Without him, I could not have carried everything back alone. He laughed and said he should be thanking me since today was the first time Master Ma had ever spoken to him directly and even remembered his name. I asked if Master Ma was really that impressive. Dan said the man managed the whole market and was the most powerful figure in the area. That puzzled me a little. A market this size did not seem like enough to satisfy someone of his obvious capabilities. There had to be more to his situation than met the eye. Before Din left, I pressed a large piece of pork into his hands as thanks. He refused. I insisted. He refused again. I told him if he would not accept it, I would feel too embarrassed to ask for his help in the future. That worked. He took the meat and headed home. I cut a small piece for myself, then picked up a portion for Uncle Zhang and went next door to collect Xiaoyan. The smell of braised pork filled the whole kitchen and drifted out into the street. I had found a woman at the market selling homemade bean paste, a recipe passed down from her grandfather who had once worked in a city restaurant. The flavor reminded me of soy sauce. I bought several jars on the spot and felt genuinely excited for the first time about cooking in this world. I also found someone selling sugar, which was more expensive but worth it. With those 2 ingredients, I made a simplified version of red braised pork, blanched, pan-fried until golden, then stewed slowly with bean paste, sugar, and salt until the meat was tender and the sauce thick and glossy. When I lifted the lid to reduce the sauce, the smell hit both of us so hard that Xiao Yin started fanning the steam toward her face. Neighbors walking past outside stopped in their tracks. A few stood there a while before hurrying home, worried they would end up knocking on my door and asking for a bowl. The meat was everything I had been missing. Soft, rich, with just enough chew, and Xiao Yin got a ring of oil around her mouth by the second bite. She announced she wanted to learn to cook so she could make good food for herself. I told her to grow a little bigger first. After dinner, I went next door to ask Zhang's second daughter-in-law to sew Xiao Yin 2 new sets of clothes from fabric I had bought at the market. The girls' clothes were patched so many times the seams were splitting. The woman refused any payment and said neighbors helped each other. I let her refuse, knowing I had already brought their family a piece of meat at noon. I did not tell Xiao Yin about the clothes. I wanted it to be a surprise. 2 days later, the new clothes were ready, and she wore them around the village for days with the proudest expression I had ever seen on her small face. After the market trip, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Each morning, I visited Dr. Chen to study. Afternoons, I tended the vegetable seeds I had planted in the yard, experimented with cooking, and occasionally fished to keep the spirit beast fed at night. Days passed quietly and steadily. Then one morning, Dr. Chen looked at me and said I did not need to study the 100 Herbs Classic anymore. Dr. Chen told me I had learned the 100 Herbs Classic faster than he expected and did not need to study it anymore. I felt relief wash over me. I had been reading and rereading that book so thoroughly for weeks, pretending to learn gradually what I had actually absorbed in a single session. Keeping up that act without revealing too much had been genuinely exhausting. But he reminded me the test still had to happen. His condition was simple. Within 1 hour, I had to find and bring back 10 medicinal herbs listed in the 100 Herbs Classic from the area around the village. No book allowed. No damaged roots. No mistakes. I took the herb basket and digging tool he offered and headed down the hill feeling confident. That confidence faded quickly. The first herb I found took nearly 15 minutes to dig up carefully without damaging the roots. If every herb took that long, I would run out of time. I pushed myself to move faster. I moved along the paths, scanning both sides of every trail, using my ability the moment I spotted anything promising. Dandelion, cocklebur, plantain, one by one I dug them up and placed them carefully in the basket, wiping sweat off my face with muddy hands. A villager spotted me and laughed at how dirty I looked. When I explained it was a test from Dr. Chin, he immediately went serious and offered to help. I turned him down. This had to be done alone. He ran off into the village, and I thought nothing of it. What I did not realize was that within minutes practically the whole village knew I was being tested. Everyone quietly made sure to stay out of my way and kept the children from running near me. The village became unusually still. I noticed it was quieter than normal, but had no time to think about why. I reached 9 herbs with time running short and racked my brain for where to find the last one. Then I slapped my forehead. I had been overthinking it. The answer was right at home. I ran back to my own yard and looked at the small patch of plants growing in the corner. Cowbone grass. It had been there since the very beginning. I ran back up the hill with the full basket, slightly out of breath. Dr. Chen looked through the herbs carefully and nodded with satisfaction. Then he said something that made me pause. He mentioned that the area around the village only had about 10 types of medicinal herbs growing in it, and that reaching all of them in time showed I had been paying attention. I felt quietly ashamed. Honestly, I had not been paying careful attention to what grew near the village. I had been relying on my ability to identify things as I stumbled across them rather than actively mapping out what was nearby. Dr. Chen thought I had been diligent. The truth was I had barely made it in time because I had been careless. I made a private note to do better. He told me I had passed, then asked me to go down and bring the village elders up to witness the formal ceremony. I stared at him for a moment. I had not expected anything formal. Then I ran back down. The whole village already knew about the test and had been watching anxiously all morning. When I told them Dr. Chen wanted witnesses for the official apprenticeship ceremony, people started getting ready immediately. Some changed into their best clothes they only wore at New Year. When everyone gathered at the small courtyard on the hill, Uncle Zhang stepped forward as the senior elder and presented a basket of eggs and cured meat, with 2 bags of rice and flour carried behind him. He said it was the village's contribution to my apprenticeship gift since I could not afford one myself. Then he told Dr. Chen something I had never heard before, something not in the original boy's memories. He said that many years ago during a famine and desperate migration, it was my grandfather who had led and supported the group of people who eventually became the founders of our village. Without him guiding them through that disaster, Ninely village might never have existed. My grandfather had fallen ill during the journey and never fully recovered, dying young. The village had always carried that debt quietly. Uncle Zhang bowed deeply to Dr. Chen on behalf of everyone and asked him to be patient with me given my difficult background. Every villager bowed with him. Even Dr. Chen, who had spent decades cultivating his composure, was visibly moved. I was completely stunned, both by what I had just learned about my grandfather and by what the villagers were willing to do for me. Dr. Chen lifted Uncle Zhang to his feet and assured him that taking me as a student was a good thing for him too, and that he would teach me properly. After some gentle back and forth, he accepted a few eggs and a piece of cured meat as the symbolic apprenticeship gift and refused everything else. I quietly resolved to pay the value back to the village somehow. Then, with everyone gathered as witnesses, the formal ceremony began. The ceremony itself was simple. Dr. Chen was not a man who liked formality. I bowed to the ancestral teacher's tablet, then knelt and offered him tea with both hands. He accepted it, took a sip, and that was it. I stood and called him Shifu for the first time. He told me to rise. Then he gave each villager a small cloth medicine packet he had prepared himself, blended to repel insects and help with sleep, effective for about 2 weeks when hung near the bed. The villagers who had been trying to be polite about refusing gifts immediately forgot their hesitation. It was mosquito season and everyone wanted one. I handed them out one by one, starting with Uncle Zhang. Before the villagers left, Uncle Zhang pulled me aside quietly and asked me to visit my grandfather's and parents' graves when I had time, to share the good news with them. I promised him I would. After everyone had gone down the hill, I stood at the entrance of the courtyard watching their figures disappear below. Dr. Chen stood beside me and and said my grandfather had planted seeds of kindness long ago, and that was why I had such good neighbors today. I told him I had never known any of this. My grandfather and parents had never spoken of it. He said that was the mark of a truly noble person, someone who did good without expecting anything back. He sounded genuinely regretful that he had arrived too late to ever meet my grandfather. Then I asked him something that had been sitting in my chest since Uncle Zhang's speech. I asked if he knew how my parents had really died. Uncle Zhang had mentioned they had been deceived and met their end through some kind of trouble. That was different from what the original boy had been told, that they had drowned accidentally. Dr. Chin was quiet for a moment. He said he had been away treating a patient in the city when it happened and had only heard the drowning story secondhand. He had never seen the bodies himself. He then told me gently not to go asking questions yet. Uncle Zhang and the others had kept this from me deliberately, and it was not out of ill intent. They were protecting me and Xiao Yin until I was strong enough to handle whatever the truth involved. Asking now, while I was still weak and without resources, would accomplish nothing. I thought about it honestly. I did not have a deep personal grief for parents I had never truly known. What worried me was whether their deaths had left some danger pointed at me and Xiao Yin. But Dr. Chin was right. Knowing the truth right now would not change anything. Learning and becoming capable was the only path forward. I told him I understood. He looked pleased, then said there was something he wanted to teach me now that I had formally become his student. Dr. Chin, my Shifu now, told me that a good doctor needed 3 things: excellent medical skill, a calm and unshakable mind, and a strong, healthy body. He explained the calm mind first. Doctors encountered all kinds of patients, people screaming in pain, people near death, people with frightening conditions, and sometimes people or family members who became angry and unreasonable. Without composure, accurate diagnosis became impossible. His expression as he described difficult patients told me he had personal experience with this. The strong body mattered for the same reasons. Dealing with difficult situations, traveling into mountains for herbs, journeying long distances. A doctor who was sickly could not serve anyone well. Then he asked if I remembered the martial form he had been practicing the first morning I arrived. I said yes, more honestly than he knew. He told me he had learned that technique when he was young and credited it with keeping his body strong into old age. Now that I was formally his student, it was time to teach it to me. I tried to look appropriately surprised that he knew martial arts. Before teaching the form itself, he sat me down and explained the structure of cultivation in this world. There were 2 great divisions, postnatal and prenatal. Within the postnatal level alone, there were 3 stages: blood-chi realm, sinew-bone realm, and inner organ realm. Blood-chi practitioners circulated and strengthened their vital energy, becoming physically powerful, strong enough to throw off several men at once. Sinew-bone practitioners went further, tempering their bones and tendons through special methods until they could pull a running horse to a stop or throw a bull with bare hands. Inner organ practitioners had pushed external strength to its limit and turned inward, hardening the 5 organs and 6 viscera, things normally fragile and easily damaged. A master of this realm could run 1,000 li without exhaustion or hold their breath underwater for hours. This was considered the absolute peak of human potential, earned by perhaps 1 in 10,000 people, and those who reached it were called grandmasters. I thought about Master Ma at the market and the pressure I had felt from him even from a distance. Now I understood why. I asked what lay beyond that, the prenatal realm. Shifu shook his head and said he genuinely did not know. Those people were rarely seen by ordinary practitioners. Some wandered the world freely, others held power over entire nations. Then I asked what his own level was. He laughed and said he was old and it did not matter anymore, that he was a doctor, not a fighter. I let it go. He was not going to tell me. Then he said that whatever his level, he was perfectly capable of teaching me the fundamentals of physical cultivation and the form he had promised. He told me to pay close attention. Shifu told me the form was easy to learn but difficult to master, then began demonstrating it from the beginning. The moment he started the first move, my ability activated automatically. Cultivation method detected. Begin simulation? I said yes silently. The progress bar climbed steadily as he moved through each technique, and by the time he reached the final movement and settled into his closing stance, it hit 100%. Simulation complete. The technique was called the Body Nourishing Fist. Shifu had created it himself by taking a fragmentary, incomplete technique he had found in his youth and working out the missing parts through his own understanding. The description said it could refine blood and qi, strengthened sinew and bone, and if practiced deeply enough carried a real chance of breaking through to the inner organ realm. I was quietly stunned. Independently developing a complete cultivation method from a broken, incomplete one was not the work of an ordinary person. Shifu was far more remarkable than he let on. When he finished and asked if I had understood what I saw, I told him honestly that I had not. He laughed and said that was expected. The outward form meant little. The real substance was in the breathing methods and mental guidance for circulating blood and qi, which he then spent the next 2 hours teaching me step by step. By the time he stopped, we had covered the first 9 of 36 movements. He said those 9 were focused on circulating blood and regulating breath, the foundation. If I practiced them consistently and truly mastered them, I would enter the blood qi realm. The remaining movements were too demanding for my current body and would wait. He reminded me not to push too hard or too fast, and also told me to eat more meat. Cultivation consumed energy, and I needed to keep my nutrition up or I would wear myself out rather than strengthen myself. He mentioned he still lacked a few herbs to complete a blood-nourishing formula that could speed up my progress, and that he would look for them next time he went into the mountains. I told him he had already done far more than enough. He waved me off. Before I left, he handed me another book, an acupuncture and meridian points treatise. He told me to memorize all the body's pressure points before my next visit because he would be testing me on them. I walked down the hill carrying a sleeping Xiao Yin in my arms, the new book under one arm, feeling slightly dazed. Back home, my first stop was Uncle Zhang's house. I pressed money into his hands to cover what the villagers had contributed to my apprenticeship gift. He tried to refuse. I insisted. The villagers had little enough as it was. I was not going to let them carry that cost for me. Then I went to the yard to begin practicing. This time I was going to use my ability while training. I chose to begin cultivating immediately. The moment I confirmed it, a flood of understanding poured into my mind. Not memorized instructions, but genuine felt insight, like suddenly knowing how a movement should feel from the inside. I began practicing the first 9 movements of the body-nourishing fist in the yard. The first run-through was clumsy and unsteady. The second was noticeably smoother. By the third, I was finding a rhythm. Each repetition built on the last in a way I could feel physically, not just understand mentally. When I tried to move into the 10th technique on my first attempt, my body ached sharply and resisted. Shifu had been right. The later movements were beyond what my current body could handle. I pulled back immediately and returned to the first movement. By the 9th repetition of the sequence, my movements were flowing naturally, each technique connecting to the next without hesitation. When I finally settled into the closing stance, I breathed out slowly and felt warmth moving through me, my mind calm and my body at ease. I understood something about my ability now. Simulating a technique did not hand me mastery. It gave me deep intuitive understanding that made learning dramatically faster. The actual strength still had to be built through real practice, repetition by repetition. The ability was a powerful guide, not a shortcut. My stomach growled loudly right after I finished. I had burned far more energy than I expected. I went inside and cooked a proper meal, cured pork with wild greens, steamed fish, and several bowls of rice. I ate everything. I could not remember being that hungry since the first days after waking up in this body. Afterward, I sat in the reclining chair to think. A lot had happened today. I was now formally Dr. Chin's student, the first real foundation I had in this world. I had learned about the cultivation levels and how extraordinary even mid-level practitioners could be. I had confirmed that my ability could dramatically accelerate my training. And I had heard the first hint that my parents' deaths were not the accident everyone claimed. I decided my priority going forward would be cultivation first, medicine second. My ability made both achievable together. But cultivation required meat and good food consistently, which meant money. The Red Moon Carp funds would not last forever. In a few days, I would go back to the rare fish spot and try my luck again. As for my parents, I would leave that question alone for now. When I was strong enough to actually do something about whatever the truth was, then I would ask. For now, I pulled out the new book Shifu had handed me on the way down the hill and opened it. I opened the acupuncture and meridian points treatise, and my ability immediately offered to download it. I read through every page, the progress bar climbing steadily until it finished. Then I chose to learn. The knowledge settled into me like the herb book had, complete and clear. The human body's pressure points, how they connected to every organ and function, how a skilled practitioner could heal serious illness with needles alone without any medicine at all. I sat quietly afterward, feeling genuinely humbled by how deep this field went. I knew I had only absorbed theory. Actually using needles on a real patient without hurting them would require years of practice under proper guidance. But understanding the foundation already put me far ahead of where I would have been otherwise. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing the book in the fading sunlight until it got too dark to read. That night Xiao Yin fell asleep again before the spirit beast arrived. The small creature had an uncanny sense of timing. It always waited until she was fully asleep. I had barely finished tucking in her blanket when the familiar scratching came at the door. I brought out the fish basin and opened the door. The black creature jumped back one neat step, then sat down with both front paws together and watched me calmly, waiting. It was noticeably more relaxed than when we first met. No puffed fur, no tension. It ate directly from the basin now instead of grabbing one fish at a time and hiding to eat it. I set the basin down and stepped back as usual to give it space. Its claws could split stone. I had no intention of crowding it. When it finished and hopped over the fence, I moved to collect the basin. Then I stopped. It had come back. I asked if it was still hungry. It looked at me with an expression I could only describe as mildly contemptuous. Then I noticed it had something in its mouth. It walked forward, set the object down on the ground, and stepped back. Then it just waited and looked at me. I picked it up carefully. It was a plant, roots still attached, soil still clinging, with several fine root hairs spreading from the base. In the dim moonlight, I turned it over slowly, and the longer I looked, the more certain I became. Before I could fully form the thought, my ability answered for me. The glow that appeared was white with a faint thread of red woven through it. Ginseng, over 100 years old. The description said ginseng of sufficient age could develop a spiritual awareness and begin to manifest its own consciousness. 100-year-old ginseng root, brought to me as a gift by a spirit beast. My eyes went wide and stayed that way. 100-year-old ginseng root. I kept turning it over in my hands, barely able to believe it. In the 100 Herbs classic, ginseng was listed among the most precious medicinal plants in existence, and its value grew with every passing decade. A root with decades of growth was already worth a great deal. One over 100 years old was the kind of thing medicine shops kept as their most prized treasure, and the faint red glow mixed into its white light told me this one was already edging toward the properties of a spirit herb, something beyond ordinary medicine entirely. I looked over at the spirit beast, who was calmly licking its paw and washing its face as if nothing remarkable had happened. I crouched down and tried my most friendly voice, asking if it could bring me more things like this in exchange for whatever fish it wanted. It glanced at me sideways with an expression that I can only describe as mild contempt, then walked to the fence, leapt over, and disappeared into the dark. I laughed quietly to myself. Being looked down on by a small animal was apparently how my evening was ending. I lit an oil lamp, a rare indulgence, and carefully cleaned the soil from the root with a damp cloth. The main body was plump and rounded, the long root hairs spreading out in a shape that was beginning to resemble a small human figure. Some of the finer roots had been snapped off during digging, which was a shame, but I could hardly complain. The creature had brought me a treasure. Expecting perfect technique was too much to ask. I wrapped it carefully and decided to bring it to Shifu in the morning. The next day, after practicing the body-nourishing fist twice in the yard and eating breakfast, I brought Xiao Yin up the hill and immediately showed Dr. Chen what I had. The moment he unwrapped it, his eyes went wide. He took it from my hands and examined it closely for a long time before setting it down with a slow exhale. A fresh 100-year wild mountain ginseng of exceptional quality. He asked how I had gotten it. When I told him the black spirit beast had brought it as a gift after eating the fish, he was genuinely astonished. He said a creature that would do something like that had developed the ability to understand human intentions. It was acting with deliberate thought, not instinct. He said warmly that this was the reward of kindness, that by choosing to feed the creature rather than drive it away, I had earned a rare bond. I felt quietly guilty hearing that. The honest reason I had not driven it away was that I was genuinely afraid of what those claws could do to me. Then I asked what a 100-year ginseng like this was actually worth. Dr. Chen asked if I wanted to sell the ginseng. I told him I just wanted to understand its value first. He explained that 100-year wild mountain ginseng was always scarce and always in demand. It could replenish vital energy, strengthen the body's foundation, and in critical situations even sustain a dying person's life. Cultivators and wealthy nobles competed fiercely for it. He examined the root carefully, and said that despite the broken root hairs, its medicinal potency was actually stronger than typical 100-year ginseng. Something about where it had grown made it unusually powerful. Then he told me the price. A normal 100-year ginseng sold for at least 1,000 silver taels in a major city. Mine was likely worth more. 1,000 taels. 10 times what the red moon carp had brought. I sat with that for a moment. Then Shifu told me not to sell it. He said if I truly intended to pursue cultivation, this ginseng was one of the finest possible aids for a blood-chi realm practitioner. He could refine it into blood-nourishing pills. Once I had the foundational movements properly established, taking one pill each day would bring me to the blood-chi realm far faster than anything else could. I did not hesitate. I told him to refine it. He seemed pleased by my answer and said I was right. Silver was something external, but one's own capability was not. He warned me that I could not take the pills until the form was properly rooted in my body, or the medicine would be wasted. That was when I told him I might already have made some progress with the form. I asked if I could demonstrate. He smiled indulgently, clearly not expecting much after only one day. I began the sequence. By the time I finished the first movement, his smile had faded. By the third movement, he was standing completely still. I worked through all 9 movements, then started again from the beginning, running the full sequence 9 times before settling into the closing stance. When I looked up, his face was frozen in an expression I had never seen on him before. He murmured something about 9 cycles completing the return, blood and chi fully active. The form had been fully internalized. Then he turned to me with unusual intensity and asked what had happened when I practiced yesterday. I told him the truth in the only version I could share. That while practicing, understanding had suddenly flooded into me all at once, my body following the correct movements naturally. And when I came back to myself, everything that had seemed unclear before was suddenly obvious. Dr. Chen went very quiet. Then he said a single word: enlightenment. He looked at me the way someone looks at something extraordinarily rare, and said quietly to himself that the student he had taken on a passing impulse might be a martial genius who had achieved enlightenment on their very first day of practice. Dr. Chen stared at me for a long moment after I finished demonstrating the form. When he finally found his words, he said what I had experienced the previous night was almost certainly enlightenment, a rare state where understanding flows in all at once, where everything previously unclear suddenly becomes obvious. Most cultivators spent their whole lives never experiencing it even once. The fact that I had entered it on my very first day of practice meant I had exceptional natural talent. I nodded along humbly, while quietly noting that my ability could reproduce this state deliberately whenever I needed it. I had chosen to show Shifu what I could do on purpose. Building a reputation as a gifted student now would make it easier to explain rapid future progress without raising difficult questions. Shifu's reaction exceeded what I had expected. He became visibly excited, said he had never in all his years encountered anyone who achieved enlightenment on their first attempt, and immediately declared the ginseng pills could not wait. He disappeared into his medicine room to begin refining, saying it would take at least a full day and night. I could not help. With nothing to do and the spirit beast's generous gift still fresh in my mind, I decided the right response was to go fishing. I took Xiaoyan down to the river, set up at the rare fish spot I had not visited since catching the red moon carp, and used blood apricot fruit as bait. The white glow on the water was still strong and concentrated. Unlike the small fish spot the villagers had fished nearly to nothing, this one had been left alone long enough to fully recover. I waited patiently with a grass stem between my teeth. Patience was not optional in fishing. If you could not sit still, you had no business holding a rod. After a long, quiet stretch, the float trembled. I rested my hand on the rod and waited. Then it shot straight down. I lifted hard. Something powerful pulled back immediately. Whatever was on the line did not behave like the cyan armor fish or the red moon carp. Instead of broad surging runs, it drove straight down toward one fixed point at the bottom and held there stubbornly, as if determined to anchor itself to the riverbed. I worked it steadily. My body was noticeably stronger now after even a short time practicing the form, and the upgraded rod held firm. Eventually the fish tired, and I scooped it up with the net. I looked at it for a moment, genuinely puzzled. It was about 2 feet long, 2 or 3 fingers thick, shaped like a loach, and entirely golden. My ability identified the golden fish immediately. It was called a golden loach, a rare fish, entirely gold-colored, skilled at burrowing into the riverbed. It contained spiritual essence, with extraordinarily nourishing flesh that could balance and strengthen the body's vital energy. And the third line stopped me. Golden loach always appeared in pairs and never swam alone. There was another one down there. I baited the hook again with blood apricot fruit and dropped it back in. I expected a long wait. Instead, the float plunged almost immediately. I barely had time to grab the rod. The second golden loach came up fighting just as hard as the first. I looked at the two golden fish in my bucket and sat quietly for a moment. The blood apricot fruit was more powerful bait than I had fully appreciated. Something about it drew rare fish with almost irresistible force. I tried once more after that, but nothing came. Switching to earthworms brought up ordinary small white fish immediately, which told me the rare fish were simply gone from this spot for now. I fished a few dozen small ones for the spirit beast's evening meal and packed up. On the way home, Xiao Yin came running back to me with a small bundle of wildflowers she had been gathering in the grass. She held them up proudly. I asked if she ever got bored coming to the river every day. She looked genuinely puzzled by the question and said there were flowers to pick and butterflies to chase, and she was never unhappy as long as she was near me. I had nothing to say to that. Back home, I thought carefully about the two golden loaches. Selling them was one option, but Dr. Chin had no time to go to the city soon, and I did not know how long they would stay alive outside the water. And I did not need the money urgently right now. The description said they were a powerful, nourishing food. My cultivation was progressing well, but my body's foundation was still weak from the illness. These fish might be exactly what I needed to strengthen it. I decided to keep both and share them with Shifu the next day as a proper meal together. The red moon carp had ended up being sold rather than shared. I had been receiving from Shifu constantly since arriving here and had given almost nothing back. This felt like the right moment to change that. That evening after Xiao Yin fell asleep, the spirit beast arrived as usual. I set out the fish basin and stepped back. But instead of moving straight to the food, it circled me several times. Nose working, eyes suddenly bright. Then it sat down and stared directly past me toward the kitchen. I watched it carefully. It had smelled something on me that the regular fish could not compete with. A thought formed slowly in my mind. This creature wanted the golden loaches. The spirit beast kept staring past me toward the kitchen. I pressed my hand to my forehead. Of course, the two golden loaches were in there, and I had been handling them earlier. Their scent was still on me, and apparently this creature's nose was sharp enough to pick out one specific fish smell from a basin full of others. I tried negotiating. I told it the fish in the basin were all for it, and it could eat as much as it wanted, but the golden loaches were mine. It blinked at me and continued staring at the kitchen. I tried again, holding up one finger. One loach. I could give it one. It looked at me for a moment, then nodded. That confirmed everything. It had understood me all along. Every time it had seemed confused or oblivious, it had been pretending. I had been outsmarted by a juvenile animal for weeks. I went inside, lifted the wooden board off the water jar, grabbed one of the loaches, and brought it out. The moment I held it up, the spirit beast was already watching with bright, eager eyes. Before I even finished speaking, the fish was gone from my hand, and it was eating. I watched it bite the head off cheerfully, tail swishing, eyes narrowed with pleasure, and quietly mourned what was essentially 100 silver tails disappearing in 3 bites. Then I reminded myself it had brought me 100-year ginseng root the night before, and felt slightly better. When it finished and looked at me again, I held up both hands quickly and said the second one was not available. It gave me a sideways glance that clearly communicated disappointment in my generosity, then walked over to the regular fish basin and began eating those instead. Once it had settled in, I crouched down and proposed a deal. If it could find more plants like the ginseng root it had brought me, I would trade rare fish for them whenever I caught any. It tilted its head, seemed to think about it for a while. I later suspected it was just making me wait on purpose out of annoyance at not getting the second loach, then nodded. Both of us felt we had gotten the better end of the arrangement. It ate everything in the basin that night and waddled slightly when it jumped over the fence, belly visibly full. I laughed quietly and went to bed. The next morning, I practiced the forms several times and felt the difference in my body immediately. Even after just 2 or 3 days, the technique was already strengthening me noticeably. More energy, clearer mind, steadier movement. After breakfast, I picked up the remaining golden loach in its bucket and headed up the hill with Xiao Yin. Shifu had said the blood-nourishing pills would be ready today. With the ginseng refined into medicine and my cultivation already showing real progress, the blood-chi realm felt very close now. When we arrived at the small courtyard, the medicine room door was still closed, and a faint herbal smell drifted from inside. I quietly picked up the broom and started sweeping the yard. Xiao Yin grabbed a smaller broom from the corner and helped without being asked. We had almost finished when the medicine room door opened and Shifu stepped out, smiling warmly. He confirmed the pills were done, 20 blood-nourishing pills refined from the 100-year ginseng. He handed me a small white porcelain bottle that felt heavier than I expected. I asked if the pills would be more effective after I had already entered the blood-chi realm rather than before. He confirmed that was true, but explained that my body's foundation was still weak from the illness, and without the pills reaching the realm would take considerably longer. I nodded and let the matter rest. Then I brought out the bucket from the corner and showed him the golden loach. His eyes went wide immediately. He recognized it at once and said it was another of the 10 great delicacies. Though ranked lower than the red moon carp in terms of pure flavor, it far surpassed the red moon carp in its nourishing properties. It was the ideal food for anyone with a weak constitution. He mentioned that the noblewoman who had bought the red moon carp had recovered somewhat, but still remained frail. If she had eaten golden loach instead, she would likely have fully recovered. Then he grew thoughtful and asked where exactly I had caught it. When I told him it was the same spot where I had caught the red moon carp, his expression became serious. 2 different rare fish from the 10 great delicacies, from the same small rural Shifu, said the golden loach had arrived at exactly the right moment. My body's foundation was still weak from illness, and filling that gap would normally require burning through several of the precious pills. The loach could do the same thing through food, saving the pills for their proper purpose. I tried to insist the fish was meant as a gift for both of us to share. He said he would have 1 bowl of soup and the rest was mine. He cleaned and prepared the loach himself, keeping even the blood, added several medicinal herbs, and set it to simmer. The smell that filled the house over the next hour was extraordinary, a deep, rich, living freshness that made both Xiao Yin and me swallow repeatedly just breathing the air. When it was ready, he served small bowls for himself and Xiao Yin, then pushed the rest of the pot directly in front of me. He told me to drink all of it, including the solids at the bottom, and not to leave a drop. I drank 1 bowl, then another, then the rest. The flavor was unlike anything I had tasted, so fresh it seemed to open every pore in my body at once. Even Shifu, who had decades of experience with rare ingredients, paused after his first sip and said quietly that he finally understood why wealthy people paid fortunes for these fish. A short while after finishing, I felt heat spreading through my body, gathering in my core. Shifu told me to go outside and practice the form immediately to direct the medicine. I walked into the yard and began. The moment I started moving, the heat in my body responded, not fighting me, but following the movements, gathering and flowing with each technique. I lost track of time completely. Then something shifted. My blood and chi connected all at once throughout my whole body, flowing freely in every direction as smoothly as water finding its level. I slowed the movements, settled into the closing stance, and stood still, eyes closed, feeling what had just happened. Shifu said quietly from the side that I had done it. The blood chi realm. I opened my eyes. My body felt lighter and stronger than it ever had. When I focused my mind on my palm, I could feel my blood and chi gathering there visibly, the skin flushing deep red, energy pooling under the surface. When I released the focus, it faded immediately, and everything returned to normal. This was what Shifu had described, the ability to consciously direct one's own vital energy, multiplying strength and toughening the body's defenses in an instant. An ordinary person would have no chance against even a beginner at this level. Shifu walked over and asked how it felt. I told him honestly that I was beginning to understand why cultivators were so formidable, and that I could barely imagine the levels above this. He said with quiet confidence that reaching those levels was only a matter of time for someone with my talent. Then his expression grew serious. He said that now that I had become a true cultivator, there were things I needed to know. There was a distinction in martial cultivation between training methods and fighting methods, and it was time he explained it. River, that was not normal. He did not know the reason, but told me firmly never to mention the rare fish to anyone outside the village. Something that valuable would attract dangerous attention. If word spread that this river contained rare fish, outsiders might try to seize it and drive the villagers away. I understood immediately. I had already decided privately that I would not sell any more rare fish regardless. My arrangement with the spirit beast made far more sense anyway. When I mentioned that the second golden loach had been eaten by the spirit beast, Shifu just smiled and said it was fair exchange given what it had brought me. He suggested we cook the remaining one together and share it. Then he said something that made me stop. He said the timing of this fish was fortunate. If things went well, today might be the day I entered the blood-chi realm. Shifu explained the distinction between training methods and fighting methods. The body-nourishing fist was a training method. Its purpose was to strengthen and nourish the body, building a powerful foundation over time. Fighting methods, also called killing methods, worked differently. They were designed purely for combat, to release maximum destructive force in the shortest time with the least cost to the user. In terms of raw offensive power, fighting methods far surpassed training methods. I asked what fighting method our lineage used. He told me we had none. I stared at him. He laughed and said there was nothing strange about it. He was a doctor who disliked fighting, and without competitive drive, he had never developed anything worth calling a proper combat technique. The body-nourishing fist was his life's achievement, and it was a training method through and through. But then he said he had several good fighting methods available, just not ones that belonged to our lineage. Over his years of travel, he had received some. From martial artists who paid their medical fees with techniques, bought others at markets in large cities, and found one by chance during a herb-gathering trip in the mountains. I asked in disbelief if combat techniques could really be bought and sold openly. He laughed again and said the world was vast and surprising, and that there were people who had even made their life's work public for anyone to learn from. He came back out carrying 3 books. One was a staff method, one a saber method, one a sword method. All 3 were sinew-bone realm techniques, the level above where I currently stood. I thought carefully. Trying to learn all 3 would be foolish. One technique practiced deeply was worth far more than 3 learned poorly. I chose the saber method. Shifu handed me the book and told me its name was the 4-direction saber. He had found it in a mountain cave years ago while gathering herbs. The dried remains of a person lay inside, and the technique manual was wrapped in oil paper beside the bones. He had buried the remains properly and taken the book. He was honest that he had only read through it himself and never practiced it, so he could offer guidance but not direct instruction. How far I took it would depend entirely on my own effort. He said that in the hands of a skilled practitioner, the 4-direction saber could threaten even a sinew-bone realm cultivator, and that with my talent mastering, it should not be beyond me. I accepted the book with both hands, feeling the weight of his confidence in me, and quietly grateful that my ability existed, because without it I genuinely might not deserve it. That night after Xiaoyan fell asleep and the spirit beast had eaten and brought me another ginseng root of the same quality as the first, though looking somewhat put out since I had no rare fish to trade in return. I lit the oil lamp and opened the 4-direction saber manual. The moment I looked at it, the pages glowed white with a stronger thread of red than I had seen in the ginseng or the rare fish. The description said it was a sinew-bone realm. Combat technique emphasizing force and killing intent, created by a sinew-bone master who had poured his entire life into it with the goal of using it to fight an inner organ realm cultivator and survive. My ability offered to download and simulate it. I began reading through every page. When I finished, the simulation completed on its own. I chose to begin learning. The insights flooded in. 9 techniques, each one focused entirely on how to channel every part of the body into a single explosive strike. Stance, footwork, angle, the exact moment to connect breath and blood and bone into one unified burst. Nothing decorative, nothing wasted. Pure destructive intent in every movement. I went quietly to the yard with a wooden practice blade I had shaped that afternoon and began working through the techniques. After entering the blood-chi realm, my body control had improved substantially. The movements came more naturally than I expected on the first run-through. The forms themselves were not complicated. The difficulty was in the internal component, learning how to ignite the body's blood and chi at precisely the right moment to multiply the force behind each cut. That required a level of physical coordination that took many repetitions to find. I kept practicing. The insights from the ability guided me steadily, showing me what correct execution should feel like before I could produce it. Then after enough repetitions, the final gap closed. I stepped forward, connected my blood and chi in one burst, and brought the blade down in a single full cut. The wind from the strike pressed the grass flat around my feet. I stood still and breathed. That was the feeling, full body force unified in a single moment. According to the manual, achieving that once meant reaching the entry level of the technique. The wooden blade gave a sharp crack in my hands. I had split it. I looked at the broken pieces and thought that somewhere between the ginseng trading arrangement and entering 2 cultivation levels in the same day, I was going to need a real blade. The wooden practice blade had cracked during my final strike, ending the session before I was ready. I tossed the broken pieces onto the woodpile and went inside. I needed a real blade eventually, but that could wait. The next morning, I followed the routine Shifu had prescribed. Practice the form, then take 1 blood-nourishing pill and practice again to absorb its effects. The medicine was noticeably gentler than the golden loach soup, but steady. 20 pills, 1 per day, nearly 3 weeks of gradual strengthening ahead. While washing Xiao Yan's face, I noticed her sleeve was a little short. I measured her against the marks I had been keeping on the doorframe. She had grown. Her hair was no longer dry and yellowish either. It had darkened and gained some softness. Her face had color. She looked like a different child from the pale, thin little girl I had woken up to weeks ago. She ate an extra half bowl at breakfast after that, apparently determined to grow even faster. After the morning session at Shifu's, I left Xiao Yan there and headed to the market alone for the first time since the large purchase that had drawn unwanted attention. I had thought it wise to stay away for a while. Now that I had entered the bloodchi realm, I felt ready to handle anything that came up. I also had a specific purpose beyond buying supplies. I also wanted to find Master Ma. When I arrived, I spotted him quickly, but stopped before approaching. A richly dressed young man was walking beside him, chin raised, face twisted with contempt as he looked around the market stalls. Several large, capable-looking men followed close behind. Master Ma, who had seemed completely confident and commanding on my first visit, was walking with a slightly bent posture and an expression I had never seen on him, something close to anxious deference. I stepped back quietly into the crowd and listened without using my ability. I had realized since entering the bloodchi realm that cultivators were sensitive to being watched or probed, and drawing that young man's attention was the last thing I wanted. The young man complained loudly that the market smelled like the slums, that he would never have come to such a wretched place if he did not need somewhere to stop before entering the mountains to find a gift for his father. He spotted the pork stall with its hanging organs and nearly gagged, saying he could not believe people here sold such lowly meat. Master Ma kept his back slightly bent and his voice smooth and accommodating. I stayed where I was and watched, listening carefully. The young nobleman's voice carried clearly across the whole market as he pointed at the pork stall and demanded to know why such filthy meat was being sold in a place where people walked. The stall owner went completely still. Everyone else went quiet too. Master Ma smoothly guided the young man away, promising that his lodgings had been prepared and were clean and comfortable. Once they were gone, the market slowly came back to life. I stepped out from where I had been watching. Those bodyguards had not said a single word the entire time, had barely changed expression, and every one of them felt dangerous. Without even using my ability, I could sense they were strong, probably Sinubone realm or higher, every single one. Whatever family this young man belonged to, they had resources far beyond anything I had encountered in this village. I filed that away and went to do my shopping. Rice, flour, meat, the supplies at home had run low again. I found the pork stall and started picking through the cuts. I was still choosing when I heard a familiar voice behind me. It was Master Ma. He had clearly not expected to see me either. I turned and saw him staring, and I could tell from his expression that something about what he was looking at surprised him. Last time I had been thin, pale, and wearing patched clothing. That had apparently not changed much on the outside, but something else clearly had. I could see him reassessing me with different eyes as we exchanged greetings. He had the look of someone who had just noticed something they were not sure they were seeing correctly. I kept my expression pleasant and waited to see what he would say next. Master Ma's composure cracked when he looked at me properly. I could see him reassessing everything. Last time I had been thin, pale, and clearly uncultivated. Now something was different, and he could feel it. As a Sinubone realm practitioner himself, he could sense the blood and chi moving through a fellow cultivator, and what he was sensing from me had clearly unsettled him. He recovered quickly and complimented my progress with a careful smile, saying that achieving the bloodchi realm at my age would be considered exceptional even in the city. I said modestly that Shifu had been helping me strengthen my body. He mentioned that the city's standards for talented cultivators were high, then let the subject drop smoothly and asked how he could help. I took the opening directly. I told him I wanted to buy a proper battle saber, but there was nothing suitable at this market, and asked if he knew where one could be found. He confirmed that good blades were only available in the city, where skilled blacksmiths were concentrated. Village smiths could forge farm tools, but not weapons requiring that level of craft. I let a look of hesitation cross my face and mentioned that my teacher had told me not to enter the city on my own before I finished my studies. That part was not entirely true. Shifu had said no such thing, but it served its purpose. Master Ma paused thoughtfully, then offered to purchase a blade on my behalf the next time he had business in the city. He framed it casually, as a small favor between people who got along well. I let myself look genuinely pleased but uncertain, as though weighing whether it was appropriate to accept. Then I agreed. He was visibly satisfied, more than the situation warranted, which told me this small favor mattered to him for reasons beyond the blade itself. He asked what kind of saber I had in mind. I told Master Ma I wanted a simple, sturdy battle saber, nothing decorative, just reliable and sharp. When he explained the price range, I settled on a 100 tempered blade within 50 silver taels and handed him 10 as a deposit. He accepted without hesitation and promised to have something ready by the next market day. I knew he was helping me because he wanted closer access to Dr. Chen through me. I was using him just as deliberately. Neither of us was being deceived. We both understood the arrangement, even if neither said it plainly. He invited me for a drink at his place before I left. I reminded him that he had a noble guest waiting in his lodgings. His expression shifted immediately, and he excused himself in a hurry, telling me we would drink together next time when I came to collect the blade. I finished my shopping, loaded up my bamboo pack until it was full, and headed home with both hands carrying additional bags. As I passed through the edge of the market, I noticed some of Master Ma's men quietly asking the chicken, duck, and pork vendors to pack up for the day, keeping the area pleasant for the young nobleman's sensibilities. I shook my head and kept walking. What I did not know was that 2 men had been watching me from inside the market. As I left, they recognized something in my face, a resemblance to someone named Lu Ming. One of them said I looked like Lu Ming's son. The other agreed. They decided that if I was spending money freely at the market, the village elders must have been lying when they said the Lu family had nothing left. They talked briefly and agreed to handle the matter properly, somewhere away from the market and Master Ma's territory. I was unaware of any of this. What I was aware of was the group of men who had just stepped into my path on the road. I looked at them calmly. Did you just say you're robbing me? 5 or 6 men were blocking the road ahead of me, holding wooden clubs. I recognized the type immediately, local thugs, the same ones Master Ma had driven off the market grounds on my first visit, though they clearly did not recognize me from that day. They told me to hand over everything I was carrying. I asked them calmly whether they intended to kill me if I refused. That seemed to confuse them. Most people begged and panicked. I was just standing there asking practical questions. One of them shouted that yes, they would throw me in the river if I did not cooperate. I used my ability to check them briefly. Petty thieves, all of them. No history of serious violence. Just opportunists who stole from villages and made themselves a nuisance. I felt a mild disappointment. If they had been genuinely dangerous, I could have acted without restraint. As it was, I would have to be careful. I set my bags down, shrugged off the bamboo pack, and rolled my shoulders. The leader, Chen San, raised his club and swung it at me. I moved before it landed. What followed was over quickly. I had entered the bloodchi realm. These were ordinary men with no cultivation at all. The gap between us was enormous. I broke 1 limb on each of them, half hands, half feet, distributed carefully so that each person retained enough function to eventually walk away. I did not want them dying here. I just wanted them unable to cause trouble for a while. When they were all on the ground, I looked down at Chen San and told him to be grateful. My ability had shown me none of them had committed any truly serious crimes. If they had, the river comment would not have been empty. I told him that breaking 1 hand or foot each was a light lesson. If I heard they were stealing from the surrounding villages again, losing the other limbs would be the consequence. I picked up my things and walked away without looking back. Behind me, the sound of pained groaning slowly resumed once I was far enough away. I heard Shinsan shouting at whoever still had working legs to help the others up and get moving before I changed my mind. I kept walking toward the village and did not look back. Walking home, I thought about what I had just done. Breaking those men's limbs was not something I felt entirely clean about, but I did not regret it either. They had chosen that path. My ability had confirmed they were petty nuisances rather than genuinely dangerous criminals, which was why I had held back from anything worse. If they had been truly evil, the calculation would have been different. What struck me more was how completely one-sided the encounter had been. To me, their movements had looked almost slow. I could see each attack coming before it arrived and respond without real effort. The gap between a cultivator in the bloodchi realm and an ordinary person was staggering, and I had only just entered that realm. I understood now why Shifu had said even the weakest real cultivators were rare and formidable. The path to the bloodchi realm was genuinely difficult for most people. I had reached it quickly only because of my ability, Shifu's guidance, and the golden loach's nourishing effects. Without those advantages, I might have spent years without making it. I got home, put everything away, and felt satisfied with the day. The blade arrangement with Master Ma had gone smoothly. I expected to see him again in 4 or 5 days when I came to collect it. I did not expect to see him the next day, at his lodgings behind the market. Master Ma had been pacing anxiously all day waiting for the noble young man to return from the mountain. When a servant came running to say they were back, the relief lasted only a moment. The young man was carried in on a stretcher soaked in blood, eyes closed, barely breathing. He had fallen into a ravine, and a sharp rock had torn open his abdomen. The bodyguards had stuffed the wound back together and applied emergency medicine, but the bleeding was slowly continuing, washing away the powder with each movement. They did not have enough medicine left for the journey back to the city. They had returned here only to restock before pressing on. Master Ma handed over everything he had without hesitation and watched the lead bodyguard redress the wound. The injury was severe, far worse than he wanted to look at directly. As the bodyguard prepared to leave immediately, Master Ma tried to stop them. If the young man died on the road before reaching the city, those bodyguards might scatter and he would be the one left holding the blame. He needed another option. His mind raced. Then a name surfaced in his thoughts and his eyes went sharp. He said he might have a way to save the young man. The next day, I was in the courtyard at Shifu's place sorting herbs when I heard urgent shouting from outside. It was Master Ma, calling my name and asking for the doctor. I looked past him and saw the stretcher. The young nobleman from the market was on it, face completely white, eyes closed, a blood-stained cloth across his abdomen. He had apparently fallen into a ravine while chasing some strange animal near a cliff edge, apparently unwilling to give up the chase even at the edge. Despite being a bloodchi realm cultivator himself, the fall had been severe enough to slice open his belly on a sharp rock. I told them to come in quickly and ran to wake Shifu. He was already awake from the noise. He checked the pulse immediately, saw the severity, and gave me clear instructions: a blood-replenishing formula, 3 bowls of water, strong fire, fast. I ran to the medicine cabinet and began pulling herbs. I had spent enough time in this room to know where everything was. I got the fire as hot as I could and pushed the decoction fast. When I checked the finished medicine with my ability, it confirmed the formula was correct, but the hasty boiling had reduced the potency to about 70%. Under the circumstances, that was acceptable. We needed speed more than perfection right now. Shifu had already transferred the young man to the treatment room and inserted silver needles across his torso by the time I brought the medicine in. The wound on his abdomen made me wince just looking at it. A long, ragged tear, already sutured roughly by the bodyguards in the field. Shifu had me feed the medicine spoon by spoon while he manipulated the throat muscles to help the unconscious patient swallow. Together we got the whole bowl down. After the needles and the medicine had time to work, the young man's color began returning slightly, and his chest started rising and falling with more regularity. The lead bodyguard, who had been watching from the corner with rigid tension, visibly exhaled. Shifu told him the internal organs had fortunately not been pierced, an extraordinary piece of luck given the size of the wound. But the blood loss was severe and there was head trauma. He could keep the young man alive for now with medicine and acupuncture, but to give him a real chance of full recovery, he would need ginseng, Hishowu, and tianqi, serious blood-building and hemorrhage-stopping medicines. The bodyguard immediately dispatched 2 men back to the city to retrieve them from the family stores. After they left, Master Ma quietly pulled his own man aside and gave him a low instruction. I caught just the end of it. He was sending someone to retrieve a battle saber from his study.